It's December 1st, if you can believe it, and there are only two acceptable ways according to which you can ring in the last month of the year. Either you can immediately blast all holiday music all the time, or you can exclusively blast My December by the always classic, purely timeless Linkin Park. I started my December with the latter, although of course I invite either or any other mode of celebration or frantic concern over the ending of the year, which you might espouse. Dear friends, thinkers, and gamers, welcome back. It's Tales of Praxis. It's a Friday night. It's dawn of the final day in Majora's Mask terminology with respect to where we are in the year. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withtheterriblefate.com, your first and final source for all the most rigorous, in-depth analyses, studying and celebrating video games specifically as a mode of storytelling. If you love these artworks, if you find yourself coming back to them, want to celebrate and dig into how they function, why they give you such joy and meaning, that's exactly what this community is designed to do. In any form you might like. Long-form written content has long been our bread and butter on withtheterriblefate.com. We have podcasts, we show up at convention lectures, and the extremely fun and rewarding newest arm of our adventures has been these live book clubs that we've been doing on Twitch for the past while, specifically as part of this Tales of Praxis series, which is solely concerned with my obsessive, passionate fascination with Bandai Namco's Tales JRPGs, a series which was formative to me as a kid, opening my eyes not only to video games, but also to their capacity for storytelling and really to the power of philosophy and allowing us to think about our place in the world in different ways, oftentimes through media of agency such as games and video games and their stories. So I've been on a quest for the better part of a year now to revisit those old loves of mine, visit the ones that I missed back in the day, and try to understand the language of the themes with which they concern themselves, the language they construct across these various works of art in order to address those themes, and the lessons they invite us to take away from them in terms of how to enact ourselves in the world in different thoughtful ways, just as the games allow us to do in worlds as diverse as Silverant and Aldrant and Dana and Rena and any other world you might think of. Rize Maxia, which we haven't been to yet, but I'm sure is on the way at one point or another. We've got plenty of studies in long-form written content on the Tales games, which have been published by myself as part of the series, which you can find on withtheterriblefate.com. And then these wonderful streams have been the other horn of it, gathering fans old and new together in hopes of working through these games, not in chronological order, but purely by the feel of their thematic connections and asking ourselves what they have to say on their own terms, what the series has to say as an intertextual unit. It's been such a joy to work through them all with you. We are in the midst of our Tales of Grace's F run, which has been rewarding, different than a lot of the games we've dwelled on before, such as Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Zestiria. But I know we've already gotten a lot out of it, not only in terms of a game that seems to stand in many ways distinctly among the other members of its series, but also in terms of the light it sheds on those other members. I'm thinking, for instance, among many such instances, of the wonderful conversation we had on the very previous stream about the language of titles in these games and the different work to which the games can put them in different contexts that can really have a significant amount of impact on how it is that we see them and think about ourselves in relation to them. Praxis gamers, yes, Grail, welcome, my friend. An interesting week. Yes, that can, I know many a kind of interesting week. I hope on net it was at least somewhat positive in the way in which it was interesting. But yes, I'm so glad to be able to offer you the controlled chaos of this stream. What a nice way to frame what it is that we do here. Controlled chaos. It puts me in mind of the experience I had dwelling with Tales of Vesperia and Tales of Destiny. Vesperia especially, as you know, if you've read my most recent publication, I think it has a lot to do with what it is to marshal meaning and identity out of chaos. We can already reset the clock until the first Tales of Vesperia citation on the stream, which is something you can always count on. I want to get right into it because we're definitely seeming to gain some momentum on the story, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. I had one broader announcement that I wanted to share with you, which I foreshadowed last time, and then I had a thought orienting myself in Tales of Graces in a slightly different way, which I wanted to just put forward to everyone as we dive back in here into what might be the next leg of our adventure. Oh yeah, pottery. I know it's one of those lesser known ones. It doesn't get the love that a game like Tales of Arise or Tales of Symphonia has gotten lately, but I got a feeling you might get something out of it. So, take a time when you have, a free 20 minutes or so. It's a really quick adventure. I imagine you'll get something out of it, and then report back to us. We're going to have a more formal way of announcing or kicking this off next week. I was hoping to be able to do it tonight, but it required a little bit of technical setup that we didn't get to. So I'll just let you know I'm very excited about this, and I hope you'll share some of the excitement with me. So fans and regulars of the stream and familiars with A Terrible Fate know that it's not just me. I'm the founder, but one of the things I love about With a Terrible Fate is we're a diverse community voiced by many different analysts who bring many different perspectives to the world of games and what makes their stories so special. And one of the pillars of the community, besides myself, is my dear, long-standing friend and colleague, Dan Hughes, who oftentimes contributes in a variety of media forms to the publication and also has his hands in many game studies related things, even beyond. And so in this past week, I'm actually delighted to be able to share with you that he's kicked off his own streaming adventures, not totally unrelated to the stuff he's been thinking about on With a Terrible Fate. So you might know that he's been publishing this wonderful series of podcast reflections on the Pokemon series in a very similar spirit to what I'm doing with Tales of Praxis and the Tales games. His podcast series is called Pokemon Rose. I encourage you to check it out, even if you haven't played the Pokemon games, because I really haven't played many of them. It's a fascinating and rewarding way of accessing them, even for the first time, and getting exposure to what they're all about in terms of their impact on gaming culture, the way in which they actually have much more story content than you might expect, how they use things like metagame to sculpt the evolution of the series, and everything in between. So I encourage you to check that out. I also encourage you to check out his new presence on Twitch. Here, I'll post his handle in the chat. I think that ought to work. Daimugen Dan, which is one of his typical game handles. And he's diving into his own world of streaming through the Pokemon games. So I believe he's doing a fresh run of Pokemon Scarlet or Violet, I forget which one, in anticipation of the second part of the DLC, which will be coming out later this month, actually while he's here. So I imagine we might even be working through that together and perhaps streaming it in one form or another. So stay tuned for details on that. And he's also working through Pokemon Black, which is one that he has actually never played. So if you enjoyed a sort of experience of a longstanding fan with a lot of thoughts on the series, diving into a brand new piece of content, similar to what we just did together with Beyond the Dawn, it's a great opportunity to go on that kind of adventure in the world of Pokemon and get exposure through someone who knows the series like the back of his hand, but is really open-minded and excited with respect to what a game he never played has to offer in terms of unique insights. So I encourage you to check that out. I can't speak to the details of his schedule, but I'm sure he's keeping it updated as he goes on there. And like I said, I have every confidence that this will facilitate a lot more guest appearances and interactivity and all those good things that Twitch is known for, and that can really add to the texture of something like a real live book club. So stay tuned. I have every hope that it's going to make his presence more of a mainstay on the With a Terrible Fate stream as well. Looking forward to that. It's a good question, Pottery. Yeah, I reached out to Dein back when he was thinking about streaming, and I encouraged him to do it on the channel. I thought it would be a really great opportunity to add a little bit more texture and some different kinds of games beyond JRPGs to the channel. But, as I mentioned, while Dan has always been like a big pillar of With a Terrible Fate and contributed a ton of content and thought and collaborations, his work in video games is strictly larger than With a Terrible Fate. He's done some other gaming podcasts. He's collaborated with some other game studies scholars. And so my guess, without having broached the subject with him more directly, is I think he wants it to be a little bit of a more independent outlet for his own work, but he's also really eager to use it as a way to interact and make a lot of contributions kind of to the Twitch and streaming arm of With a Terrible Fate in the same way that he makes contributions to the publication. So it should be, strictly speaking, positive and additive. I'm really excited about that. And as I've told the stream before, he's going to be here with my other dear friend and colleague, Dr. Matt McGill, in a couple weeks. So you'll be seeing him live and in person, along with Matt, on this stream. So we'll be able to chat in a fun in-person format as well. Well, Grail, I invite you to drop by his stream and refer to him as Dan Terrible Fate. I'm sure he would be delighted and respond to that nomenclature. The exact name of his stream notwithstanding. So there you go. You have your marching orders if you do end up going and saying hi to him. And I hope you do. I know I've said this before, but not to belabor the point, Dan's, again, independent work on the study of video game storytelling way back in high school when we first got to know each other was crucial to what inspired me to think about video games through a narratological and philosophical lens and go on to study them in undergrad, form With a Terrible Fate, do everything else professionally and passion projectly that I've done since then. So he's long been an inspiration of mine and excited to see where he goes next and what we do together next. I know, it's exhausting, isn't it, Grail? But I'll tell you, he's someone to whom I look up as mega-brained and giga-brained. So I don't know if I would offer that name to myself, though I will gladly and humbly accept it from you. But I would be the first to go to bat for Dan as probably the most giga-brained person I know when it comes to gaming. So check him out, chat with him. I know you have some great conversations about all forms of gaming, Pokemon and otherwise. And like I said, I think we'll have a more formal chat about it this coming week when we have the opportunity to spend some time together on the stream. But with that out of the way, plenty of further content to look forward to. I won't dwell on that now because as you know from the last few streams, I am still in the middle of this philosophical paper that I'm working on, in fact, for my own PhD applications. As it comes together, in the event that it's interesting to everyone, I may or may not share more about it. One of the reasons, as I've spoken about before, that I actually started With a Terrible Fate was that I'm extremely interested in using the tools of analytic philosophy to more directly engage with the aspects of games and their stories that actually make a difference to and resonate with the gamers who play them in a way that academia oftentimes doesn't. And I kind of feel that tension with this piece of writing that I'm working on now because I find it very interesting, but it's also much more theoretical and abstract than the kind of work that I love and have devoted myself to for almost a decade at this point on With a Terrible Fate. But it is game related. It's pretty interesting. Very roughly speaking, this really great and thoughtful scholar in the philosophy of games is interested in thinking about ways in which games can give us aesthetic experiences by constraining the various options that are available to us in those games and the various goals that we pursue through those options. So when we're sitting down and playing a game, where he wants us to believe that we're single-mindedly directed at a goal, all the actions available to us clearly serve that goal. And so games can offer us this kind of artificially clear picture of values, where, as opposed to in real life, where we have to weigh a variety of different values as we consider what's the best thing, all things considered, to do at any given moment in the day. In games, the answer is always pretty crystal clear in terms of what our different moves might contribute to a single goal that we're working towards. I'm making a very Aaron move in my paper and basically saying, well, that's part of the story, but actually, as it turns out, plenty of games that feature avatars avatars or player characters, whatever you want to call them, allow us to engage in the single-minded pursuit of a goal like finishing the game, while actually being essentially concerned with a range of values beyond our own. Because oftentimes in games, even as we've seen on this stream, it turns out to be the case that even if we're merely concerned with finishing the game, we have to be pretty directly and vividly concerned with the various goals and values that the characters in the game have, which we may not. Dawn of the New World, for example, with the distinction between Emil and Ratatosk, is a great example of this, and actually an example that I'm delighted to be using in the paper itself. So you see, it is all connected, even if it does speak to slightly different audiences with slightly different purposes. But I mentioned that by way of saying I'm excited to be working on that, also to be determined based on deadlines as to have it done in the next couple of weeks, because then you better believe I'll be sinking my teeth back into some much more directly, passionately oriented written studies for Tales of Praxis. So I hate perpetually promising more content when it hasn't been coming out, but I hope you take me at my word that I am sincerely so excited to be sharing more of that with you as well, and to have the opportunity to chat with you about it on the stream. And once this writing sample is all said and done, I'd be more than happy to share that around too, as appropriate, if people are interested in chatting and thinking about that. Yeah, so pottery, we can have a much more extended conversation about it. I would suggest that's an artifact of just me distilling like a much longer and more complicated theory into a bite-sized version. To expand a little bit, part of this guy's thesis is that many games encourage us to take up this kind of what he calls disposable ends, or a goal that we don't really care about in and of itself, for the sake of experiencing the struggle and the aesthetic content that comes out of the actions we take in pursuit of the goal. So think, for example, of something like when you like go for a run just for the experience of enjoying something like the runner's high, or what you're actually struggling through as you're working through the run. Even if you have this disposable goal of getting to the end of the run, it's not really about that, but the motivational structure of the game is such that you have to be pursuing that goal in order to experience the other stuff along the way. That's what I have in mind when I'm taking that model, picking it up, and plopping it into a game that has a story component, and such that you're thinking about getting to the end of the game. But in that same sense, it's not as if your goal in terms of where you're driving the value is reaching the end of the game. I wish I could say it's a myth, because I will confess I'm the kind of person who wants to hate running and oftentimes does. But what I hate and resent even more is that once I get into a little bit of a running groove, I actually do sometimes experience the runner's high and find myself enjoying it in spite of myself. So believe me when I say I'm mad to have to admit it, because I want it to be part of my identity that I think running is garbage. But it's one of those things like we oftentimes discover with different kinds of exercise and games, where something will just sometimes resonate with you. And I think that's part of it too. It's individual, right? Because I so pity you running a 10K and not hitting it. But I think there are some people who can get into that zone and some people who can't. Not that there are people who can't get into that zone at all, but I think, especially if you identify as a gamer, I think part of the battle, I would say, is finding the right game that allows you to access that kind of flow state or quality of experience that you're seeking out. For instance, I would suggest at least many people who don't get the runner's high or don't bother with actual running maybe get something similar from very grindy, Souls-like Miyazaki-inspired games like a Dark Souls or a Bloodborne or something like that, right? I remember one of my first experiences of something like a runner's high was my very first stretch of Dark Souls, where I hadn't died for something like 45 minutes, an hour. In retrospect, not very long, but when you're first getting into the groove of Dark Souls with nothing to compare it to, getting out of that pattern of dying every few minutes feels kind of transcendental in a way that I wrote about quite a while ago. Yeah, so pottery, I mean, my toy example for this in a game like this, and again, it's like the example of a toy model where you could add a lot of nuances or specifications for different cases. But what I'm trying to mount as kind of a basic framework to engage with this guy's model of gameplay is saying, look, if you're concerned with this idea of disposable ends and aesthetic experience that comes out of the struggle, we can think about something that I want to argue is structurally analogous in games that have a narrative component. This idea of the disposable end being to roll the credits, right? I think, again, that's not to say that's literally the case for every single person who sits down. He also takes himself only to be describing a particular kind of player who's in a game for the sake of pursuing a certain kind of experience. But I think from where I sit, it's fair to say that many people, when they sit down and play this kind of game, they have the disposable end of saying, okay, I'm at least going to play to the point of rolling the credits. That's when I'm going to know I'm finished. Or for another kind of player, right, you might locate the disposable end at something further down the track as like getting the platinum trophy, right, completing all of the trophies, something like that. But not for the sake of finding direct value literally in seeing the credits or simply being done with the game or being able to show off your platinum trophy. Maybe there are some player types like that, and in fact there probably are. I know people like that, but quite similarly, and I think I've experienced this in a lot of the games even that we've streamed, you might pick up a game and say, all right, the goal in terms of where we're going to end up is rolling the credits, completing everything, 100%ing it, whatever you want to call it. But the value we're going to get out of it is in the experiences and the struggles that we have along the way, and a lot of the things that actually inspire the conversations that we, as a point of fact, have on the stream in between, the time when we kick off a new playthrough and the time when we arrive at the credits. So that's the general picture of what I'm thinking about. And as I said, I'm definitely happy to share and chat about the details as I work further through it. I am on draft 5 now, so it is continuing to evolve as only philosophy does. Hey, Doug, I missed your message. Welcome back, buddy. It's a pleasure to see you back on the stream here. Hope you're having a good evening. Yeah, it's also like, it's a very interesting idea that this philosopher T. Nguyen has. I would say part of what makes it interesting is that it's a very unintuitive way of explaining things. But once you kind of see the picture, it becomes a really useful picture, I think, for like talking about and distilling a lot of our experiences in games, whether that's a video game or a sport or a board game or something like that. Because he gives a lot of examples saying basically like, look, if you think even of a party game like Twister, right, the goal isn't really to win the game in terms of, like having the most complicated outcome of where all of your hands and body parts are on the mat at the end of the game. The goal is to struggle to succeed within these constraints that actually require you eventually to fail, and then the joy we get out of it is by struggling and ultimately failing in all of these funny ways where our bodies fall apart. So it's an interesting and I think really provocative theory for identifying the different reasons according to which we would play a game and the different aesthetics that can come out of our activities in the game. But like I said, he's self-consciously concerned with opening the aperture of philosophy of games to many different kinds of games beyond single-player, narratively oriented video games, because the literature, especially in philosophy, has been somewhat narrowly focused on those games in the past. So basically what I'm trying to say is I really like the direction of that theory, but I think by overlooking these sorts of games, Nguyen actually gives himself sort of an artificially simplistic conception of the values that enter into our consideration when we're playing through a game. Because again, he thinks we're just laser focused on the goal and we don't care about anything else that has normative value or any other goals that people are pursuing besides just the disposable end of the game. And I think, as we've seen and talked about in many of these games, once you introduce a player character into the mix, you have to, in order to get the whole experience of what the action in the game consists in, think about their ends and what it is that they're trying to achieve, which has nothing to do, obviously, with the notion of completing a game, because there is no game relative to them and what it is that they're seeking out. Yes, exactly. I think that is a good motto, Pottery. Nobody watches a movie with the idea, I can't wait to hit the credits. And that is a great way of crystallizing the thrust of why, like, taking as our goal, the goal of reaching the end of the game is that kind of disposable goal. It's what kind of orients are working through in the game, but that's certainly not the point. That's, at least on my best and most charitable reading of Nguyen, I think that's what he has in mind when he's talking about disposable ends. 100%. Yeah. Like I said, I love the example of Dawn of the New World. I don't think we've talked about The Last of Us in the context of this stream, but if there are Last of Us fans in here, without any spoilers, The Last of Us Part 2 especially is a really great case study for this exact kind of stuff, where you simply have to consider the goals of the player characters as an additional set of goals beyond the disposable ends of the player, if you want to get the full picture of what's going on and what the content of that action, aesthetically speaking, is. So it's, like I said, it is a pretty fun and rewarding topic. And once you start talking about it, it touches a lot of gaming culture and I think some interesting and relatable ways. But the theory just, it makes it a little more abstract than the way in which I typically like to dive into and think about these stories. But it's a different kind of work, rewarding in its own ways. Oh, that's hilarious, Grail. Well, see, there be people of all kinds. Yes, there you go. Yep, and that's a great way of bringing it into the original Last of Us as well. Absolutely. Oh, well, friends, I'll tell you, since I'm spilling my emotions and background content in my own backstory on this Friday night stream, I'll just say it warms my heart on a cold December day that we have this stream culture where not only we're so excited to do these live book clubs, but also just to sit back and chat about the structure of video game storytelling and what it is that we try to get out of them and how it is that they work more broadly. So my love to you for that. I hope you know I don't take that lightly. I'm excited to see where all of our future adventures take us, both at a high level, theoretically, and in terms of particulars, like Tales of Graces, which would have been a really great transition if my dumb video card were cooperating. So I'm gonna have to add it back real quick. Please hold. It was trying to take Friday off. I've tried to look up troubleshooting for this 1,000,001 times, and for the life of me, I can't figure out how to stop it from happening, but there we go. At least it's a quick fix. So, moving from the 5,000-foot view of what it is to play games and what kind of value inheres to our action within them, all the way down to this specific, beautiful JRPG. You know I love libraries in JRPGs. You know I can't wait to go to the library. So I'm very excited that that's how we're kicking off this stream. And I won't belabor the point, but I did want to raise one thought that I had before we go on. I'm glad that you mentioned that also, Pottery, because I was myself struck at how quickly that encounter number started racking up. Which speaks perhaps all the more to the interesting pacing of this game and the way that we've been wrestling with. And what I wanted to say by way of framing this is actually not entirely unrelated to that. Yes, thank you, Grail. I'll catch that skit. Just to put this thought in everyone's head. So I know that we've been talking, well, I've been talking at least about how I feel, and I think it's a more broadly shared sentiment than just my own weird idiosyncrasy, that Tales of Graces in some ways, in terms of its focus, in terms of the pace through which we engage its story, is a little bit unlike a lot of the other mothership titles in the series. It feels different to me in ways that can sometimes be difficult to articulate from something like a Tales of Symphonia, or a Tales of the Abyss, a Tales of Vesperia, just to shout out that one that Pottery should play at some point, Arise, pick your favorite flavor. This feels a little different to me. But I found myself thinking earlier today, and I was surprised that this hadn't come up before, it actually bears some interesting thematically similar DNA, I would say, with Dawn of the New World, which is not surprising if we step out of just looking for points of thematic relationship and think about the chronological history of these games, right? Because as I think most of the people on the stream right now know, Tales of Graces, the original first cut of it, came out in 2009. That was a year after Dawn of the New World. They both came out on the Wii. So we ought to expect that even though they perhaps seem like different games, they have some similar connective tissue. And I just found myself thinking, it's interesting that some of the things that are perhaps weird or unusual in terms of Tales of Grace's focus, I would say, strike chords for me with what I was dwelling on and really taken in by with Dawn of the New World. For instance, both of them so far, up to this point in our playthrough of Tales of Graces F, and we're not going to do spoilers, but I think, look at the playtime, we're over 40 hours into it, so I think it's fair to speak with some level of generality about it. In terms of their journeys, Dawn of the New World and Tales of Graces, right, they're largely focused on a single long journey across one world, I would say, in contrast with some of these other games that are focused with more frequently flitting back and forth between different parts of a world, or indeed between different worlds. And again, pick your favorite flavor of that without too many spoilers, but think about something like Tales of Symphonia, Tales of Arise, right? Tales of Eternia. Many of these games, I think, they introduce you to the world at a slow pace, but then they have you kind of adventuring all over it and crisscrossing back and forth on different paths, retracing your steps, going to different places. Whereas I think part of what has been unusual to me about my experience of Graces is something very similar to what happens in Dawn of the New World, where really a large portion of it, not the whole thing, but a big focus of the story is just in gradually trekking across the entire world map once and seeing all these different areas and cultures and almost using them as opportunities to discover different aspects of the characters and their relationships. Which brings me to the second point that I found really interesting to consider, the idea that rather than uncovering stuff like hidden motives in the world, like aspects of its past that had been forgotten, or particular aspects of the way in which the world was made that need to be changed, or something like that. Both of these games, Dawn of the New World and Tales of Graces, seem to be more directly concerned with discovering hidden motives that are buried within particular party members, party characters, right? Motives that are even hidden from themselves as these aspects of their identity that they can't access and yet which are motivating some of their actions. So of course in Dawn of the New World we have the centerpiece of Emil and Ratatosk and coming to learn the relationship between them in a way that is opaque in terms of understanding what are these different parts of this character, what do they want, what's their purpose in this world, what do they play in the plot's overall architecture at the beginning of the game, and which crucially illuminates the way in which the plot is structured at the turn of the game, bringing us into the final climax and confrontation and everything. And similarly in Tales of Graces, like, this was something that I was really surprised I hadn't thought about before. Like, I think there's a sense in which, at least in terms of how I'm struggling to uncover the main pieces of the plot and how they're working together, a lot of it similarly has to do with Richard wrestling with this part of himself that he doesn't understand, that's compelling him to act in ways towards people that he doesn't want to act. And similarly with Sophie, where she's wrestling with the idea of this hidden purpose that she doesn't quite remember, maybe she doesn't want to remember, and how that informs, or in fact comes into conflict with her relationships of friendship with Richard and with others in her party and in her past. So again, many different threads of this game. I don't want to oversimplify things, but I think to me, once I saw it in that aspect, it was an interesting way of imagining why this game might be at once of a piece with the Tales series, but also to me feeling distinct from some of the other mainline members, because Dawn of the New World also strikes people as very distinct, and I think many of the choices it makes are unusual, but I would say at least in a certain sense thematically resonant with what we have going on in Tales of Graces, which has me all the more excited for what comes next, because you might recall from Dawn of the New World, as I just said, everything turned on kind of finally coming to understand what Emil was and what his relationship was with Ratatosk. So I'm interested with that in mind to see, as we go on to a perhaps more revelatory aspect of Tales of Grace's plot, if we get some similar character-oriented insights with no spoilers. So those are my thoughts. I'm interested to see where we go from here. I'll catch up on your messages and then we can march on and see for ourselves. Yeah, and I think it would certainly be true of that part of Tales of Arise also. I think, to me, especially with the addition of Dawn of the New World, but even in the base game, like, I feel like Tales of Arise moves somewhat quickly beyond that, with not only going to other worlds, but also retracing all of the world and seeing how it has evolved after the different realms have been liberated, like in the second act and onward. And again, we're not done with Tales of Graces, so I don't want to be judgmental or anticipatory in terms of where it might go and where we might or might not trace through the worlds. But I think in that light, I might even ask the question, could Tales of Arise be seen as an interesting variation on this, where like its story starts off in a kind of exploratory nature that pretty closely mirrors what we have going on in Dawn of the New World and Tales of Graces as I've characterized it, but then goes on to explore other things. Because remember, while it's not totally the same in terms of like a hidden motivational structure within a character, aspects of Alphen's identity and past are also pretty directly suppressed and hidden from his view. So I think there is certainly an undercurrent of continuity there as well. All right, my friendos. Well, a little bit of extended exposition easing into a Friday night, but I thank you for indulging me with giving you a broader update on what the various members of the With a Terrible Fate family are up to in their lives with and beyond With a Terrible Fate, and for thinking through the wonderful texture of this game in relation to the other members of the series. Now let's see what we have on tap next. Welcome back to Tales of Praxis. I was thinking if you would further indulge me, I was just going to take the long way out because I had half of a memory that we maybe missed a treasure chest or two on the way in here. Not that it's a big deal, but if we can grab them on the way out.
Be careful, everyone.
And that last battle left me suspicious that we might be under-leveled somehow, so another random encounter or two I'm going to suggest will not hurt us. Although I am proud that we didn't have to turn the difficulty rating down for our boy Kurt at the end of the day. Not that completing him on moderate is a huge feather in my cap, but I'm going to take it as a victory anyways. Grail, I'm going to scroll back in your messages because I remember you also talked about how your week was, and I totally missed that.
Sometimes I can't see the value in fighting.
Hubert.
There's no profit in the enemy.
First signs of winter caused your job to be nearly dead for a day and a half. Very nice. And a Friday off for some reason. There you go. Well, those are some W's. Speaking of racking up W's. Put those in the positive column. Well, and listen, speaking of points of continuity with Dawn of the New World, I mean, if Ratatosk taught us anything, it's that having all of the monsters or fauna of the world at your fingertips can be conducive to quite a bit of power. He truly was a zoological force to be reckoned with, Kurt. May he rest in peace. Oh man, he chose his path. I really did. I was thinking about and appreciating that more because that's one of those mid-game turns that I've talked about before as not vividly remembering. But I really do appreciate it the more I'm sitting and thinking about it in terms of the different paths that Kurt and Malik charted and how kind of the party empowered Malik to find his own way by going with them in sort of a mirror to the path that Kurt chose for himself, staying with the country and choosing to ally with, for better or worse, his party in government parlance, right, in order to pursue his own goals. So I feel like that was one of those encounters where it's easy to be overwhelmed by how difficult the fight is, but when you step back and think about its symbolic content, there's quite a bit of interesting stuff there. Oh, okay, so it was just this one that I missed. And I came so close, too. I must have just go, oh, that's why. It tricked me! It was one of those dumb chests that tricked me. I'm going to discard it just for spite. So we didn't need to take the long way back. Well, that's all right. As I said, another random encounter or two won't hurt. Yeah, I do think those are bespoke pottery, to the best of my recollection. Unless there's some really obscure, like, bonus or post-game enemy in Vesperia that I'm blanking on.
Enemies, look out! Roar! Be gone!
Cheerio with the Helga.
No escape. Couldn't miss if you tried.
Yeah, I feel like I would have heard and made further jokes about Machine if that came up. A zoo that even includes robots. That says an interesting amount about this world and how it views the relationship between animals and machines if you choose to read that into it. I don't know if I'm happy with the party layout. Oh, well, we certainly know that at a minimum we want Malik in there to be working on his sonic mount, the persistent subplot to our stream. Speaking about... Alright, you want a disposable end? Now, this is probably too intrinsically valuable to count as a disposable end on Nguyen's view, but if you want a burning and pertinent end which we are singularly pursuing, it's Malik's hidden mystic art. How about that? Do we know where to find that on her title palette, Grail? So we can search for it and seek it out. Resurrection, there it is. Took 2 seconds. How about that? That was actually something that I wanted to check because, as I think we were talking about last time, I feel like one really does do oneself a good service by emphasizing titles that unlock arts. Since, speaking of, the language of titles and the different ways in which the games use them, I don't think I'd really processed until we'd started getting further into this. Like, because of the way in which arts are tied to titles, if you're not being mindful to prioritizing the titles that have arts on them, your party ends up pretty limited in their, range of motion in terms of arts that they have available. That's a new one, Spectral Chains. Oh, that is fun, because those enemies, when you just think about it in the abstract, are so, biologically different, obviously. But yeah, you think about just the abstract form of them, and I can see it having the same skeleton. Very fun. Alright. I think that's prioritizing everyone in the right way, and we can cook real quick for poor Asbel's sake. Alright. Soldier on. Yes, that was a prudent urging, Grail. I appreciate it. I will say, just to continue our persistent theme of falling in love with all of the delicately balanced combat and gameplay systems and graces, the titles, too, I think, speak in favor of how it might seem like a lot to manage early on, but once you get to this point and you kind of better understand the different constraints and motivating factors behind the different abilities that are available to the characters, then it becomes pretty easy to go back to those systems that were introduced to you much earlier and ask, okay, which ones do I want to prioritize now that I kind of have some background knowledge that can actually guide my decision-making process. A pretty good learning feedback loop, if I do say so myself. Pottery, you silly dear gamer friend, it's like you don't know the Praxis stream at all. Are you kidding? The more diverse textures we can add to the way in which we're seeing and thinking about these games, the better. It only gives us more fodder for thinking about things. And that's one of those wonderful things, like so many of the elements we discuss, where it's an interesting and useful piece of design history, and then we can always push it and raise the question of okay, does that say anything interesting about the relationship between the two worlds or their ontology and how different life forms interact in them? Maybe nothing, but it gives us a better grounding for asking those questions. To wit, Actually, I think I forgot to mention this in my comparison between Graces and Dawn of the New World, but another aspect of them that struck me as surprisingly and interestingly relevant was the unusual ways in which they both use maps, right? From the very early streams of Graces, Grail, it was you who pointed out how the representation of the map of this world was very unusual for the typical format of a Tales game and less distinctive and granular in how it represented the world. And then we were talking about with the map that we saw in Fendel, how in fact maybe even different countries have different ways of representing the world according to a map. Something that also came up even in the flashback of Malik's past. And what other game has interesting philosophy of cartography? Well, you could do worse than suggesting Dawn of the New World, a game which is distinctive amongst Tales games for its almost postcard-esque approach to the world map and navigating it and thinking about our relationship to world travel in a way that is dramatically varied from the typical mode of navigation you get in a Tales game. He works out, you know, Pottery? That was the secret final lessons of his time with Malik in the Knights. It would be nice to do a side-by-side comparison of Asbel doing that versus Lloyd slip-sliding around on the way to Celsius in Tales of Symphonia. There are two different ways to approach ice and no middle ground.
Be careful, everyone.
I would put it to you, though, that that's one of the very fun things about philosophical conversation, because having waded through much more like proper philosophy of games than the average bear, I will tell you, every time you find an interesting element of games that you feel doesn't naturally fit within the literature or the way in which you're thinking about their philosophical content, all you found is a really interesting new area of inquiry that you can try to understand and situate within your broader understanding. That's part of what keeps it so exciting for me. Like, truly, every time you turn over a different element of game design or experience of games, like, you can always be delighted and you can always discover, like, an interesting new contour to your thesis that can lead you to see the overall experience of gaming in a different way. Which is part of this approach that I'm taking with my reply to Nguyen. Like, I don't want to pick apart his overall theory of games as such. Rather, I want to suggest, well, really great foundation kind of overlooks one element of games, and when we introduce that into the theory becomes even more powerful. So, same mindset. A keen eye for qualities is essential if you want to produce good gear, but don't get too hung up trying to find the strongest ones possible. There are no qualities that actually weaken gear, so dualize away until you find something that suits you. Ah, what a glass half full way of encouraging us to tinker with that system. Speaking of everything that we were just saying in terms of great system design and graces. There we go. To the Archive of Wisdom, the Super Library.
Talia, the Kree's core at the center of the world. Why would Richard go to such a place?
Hey now, take it easy. Once we hit the Archive of Wisdom, all will be revealed.
How are you doing, Sophie? You didn't seem like yourself when we saw Richard earlier. Is there anything you want to talk about?
I'm fine. Please don't worry about me. I wanted to stop Richard because we're friends.
Well, okay, if you say so.
Come, let's get back to the Amarcian Enclave.
Kurt, I wasted my life on half measures, but no more. I will fulfill your dying wish, I promise you.
Walter, no more half measures. It's a reflection in a very different context, but especially on the heels of Beyond the Dawn, that reflection of Malik's puts me in mind of Kisara trying to carry on Miguel's dream in the way she chooses to live her own life, which is very touching and which I love. It wasn't a serious mic impression, okay? It was a throwaway mic impression. Let me try. Walter, No more half measures. And that's probably the best you're going to get from me, because if you try to do an impression of someone as talented and richly nuanced as Jonathan Banks, you're going to fall short unless you're Jonathan Banks. And I will live and die by that. Well, I'll take the point for guts. That's better than nothing. It's true that, oh my god, I mean, we could talk Breaking Bad extended universe for hours on the stream, but I think Jonathan Banks is just such an exceptional and amazing actor, and talk about not just like the difficulty of the impression, but the layers of further nuance he adds to Mike, not only in terms of the character's history, but also just his mannerisms and perspective on the world through the time in Breaking Bad and then Better Call Saul and everything. Speaking of amazing character studies, right? They don't all happen in JRPGs. JRPGs are just great for them.
If you don't mind me asking, how long ago was it that you and Kurt started the revolution?
It was approximately 20 years ago, and it wasn't just us. There was one more person involved in our plight as well.
Really?
Wait. Was it a girl?
Yes.
Okay, tell us everything about her.
Sharia?
It's hard to say. It was a really long time ago.
He has amnesia too?
Liar. I don't believe you for a second.
I've never seen her show such interest in another man's past. You good with this, Asba?
Another man?
Lol. Oh, that was sweet. I wasn't sure whether we were going to get any mention of her, even opaquely, to the party, so it was interesting to see it come up in that skit. Yeah, that's interesting, Grail. So, I mean, let me turn it to you all and ask: do you have that feeling that the section with Kurt seemed rushed by virtue of how quickly he was introduced and killed? I'll say this: I think that if I were chugging through the game and ignoring the side content and didn't see the windows into Malik's past, I might have that impression, and I could work my head into seeing why that would be the case. But I think that only speaks to the importance of the context in which Kurt is embedded in Malik's past, which, like we were talking about last time, is so personal to him and importantly not pertinent to the broader party as they conceive themselves and conceive their mission in the world now. So to me, like, without picking it apart further, there's just something that is at first pass, like, I would say beautiful about Malik re-encountering this person with whom he shared a past in this new context where they'd both chosen very different paths, only for it to lead to one of them sacrificing themselves and the other taking up the mission of that person in a certain sense. So I agree. I don't like the feeling of rushed stories. I feel like that moment at first pass to me feels like just thoughtful pacing in terms of it being punctuated and cut short for a thematic reason. But I'm happy to be corrected or to have other perspectives offered. Yes, when we are gaming in slow motion pottery, that's true. It makes it all the harder for anything to feel rushed. Oh, I appreciate that. I don't know if you meant it as a compliment, but I take it as such. Yeah, and I get what you mean about the basis of the childhood friendship. I still maintain, I think that's, to me at least, that's something that is so special and magical about childhood, that it doesn't take that much for kids to bond in ways that impact them for the rest of their lives. But I can see both sides to that. I can certainly conceive of why it would sort of pull at the fringes of believability. Well, we can all agree it's true, at least. I take it to be a positive fact. Let's put it that way. At least a fact which I wear on my sleeve in terms of the ethos of With the Terrible Fate and what it is that we're up to. So if you're here, you know what you're getting. I don't think I rested at the inn. I'll just, while we're going through Zavhert, Grail, are there any other side quests that we need to be aware of, just so we don't miss anything? I'll also say, in the spirit of what you just said, Grail, okay, right to the Enclave, perfect. I think one thing that has been on my mind more broadly in my own life, but I think facilitated by a lot of the frameworks for reflection that the Tales games provide us, is we have a lot of agency in terms of which relationships we choose to invest in or dwell on from across our life. You know, like it might be true that we only got to know someone when we were passing through a town for a very short period, when we were young at a formative time in our lives. And in terms of raw amount of time, it might be the case that it would be really easy to overlook them. But we can also choose, if there's some reason according to which that moment was important to us, to reach back and reflect on it, and even decide to want to try to reconnect with that person in one way or another. I know that just anecdotally speaking, that's something that people have reached out to me in that sense. Sometimes I've thought about reaching out to people. So I feel like that desire to sculpt our identity and ongoing lives according to the connections that we want to highlight and use as foundations of our identity, drawing from our past, I feel like that's a real thing. That strikes me as believable. All right, so I wanted to stop at the equipment shop because I had a sneaking suspicion we were falling behind, especially on CC with some of these weapons. That seems to mostly just be the case with Asbel, but if we can get him a new sword, I will be a very happy camper. In fact, I think that's really all we need to do, and then we can just dualize, make sure we have enough items, and we can roll on through. Rock down to Electric Avenue. Ooh, the Scrapper! That's a cool name for a blade ring. Solemn Mechanic. A blade ring designed for pulverizing machinery. So fashionable. I would also say in that Spirit Grail, like, I find it pretty illuminating in terms of like different people having different windows into relationships to the past. Like I talked about this last stream in terms of the different experiences of lost time for different characters, and the fact that we as players only have a clear and vivid window into one such time jump, the time jump that constitutes the transition from the childhood to the adult arc, you know? And so to me, I think part of what is impactful about Kurt is exactly the fact that we don't really know all the context that makes his confrontation with Malik so meaningful to Malik, but based on our exposure to Asbel and Sophie and Richard and everything in their past, we can infer the kind of events that made it meaningful to him. And the knowledge of those without direct access to it, to me, tells a pretty interesting story of just reiterating, oh, that experience is just there for Malik. Like, we can appreciate that and sympathize with him and support him in it without being directly privy to it. Ooh, these seem like good things we wandered into. So Nightwater plus Mastery Tonic gives us Mastery Tonic EX. I love that. Maybe we can shortcut some of these titles. I feel the pull of that, Pottery. Yes. Well, because, I mean, point back to the language that we're using to talk about different parts of this game, which we've called out before, right? Like the arc that we're working through right now is oftentimes, not just by me, but by a lot of the community, referred to as the adult arc in contrast to the childhood arc. And as you say, 17 years old, you're on your way to adulthood, but in many ways, I think it's fair to say, like, Malik is an adult, Asbel not so much an adult yet. So I think there is something to the idea that we have to kind of scale our sense of time relative to the different developmental points that characters are tethered to in the typical JRPG. Which makes it all the more interesting to me, I'll tell you, when they do have older characters like a Malik or a Raven. I think that the unusual nature of that, as much as my own continually increasing age, has me leaning into those characters more and more. Oh, and now we're poor. We can probably sell some things at this point. Right. And I think that distinction too, I mean, I don't know how much we want to make of it, but I think we have a basis for making something of that distinction between legal adulthood and developmental adulthood. Not in terms of there being a literal legal system in Tales of Graces, but I do feel like part of what it's wrestling with is, you know, Asbel goes off and tries to like grow up and become a knight and become a lord, right? And do all of these things that in terms of the social structure of the world, he has the right standing and age to do, but his standing to do that is not equivalent with him having like fully realized his development. So I feel like it would be fair to say that the game is thinking in at least a somewhat reflective way about that exact tension. Yeah, definitely. I'm almost always happy with the way in which they write younger characters and older characters. Actually, I love the way they write characters. Oh no, I want to use that on Asbel's sword. Oh, can I? It might just be one for the blade ring somehow? That was weird. Oh no, it was just because those were new shards, that's it. Alright, well let's enhance our weapons and then we'll go. Are there other CC ones that we've stumbled upon? No, but this is a good one. I'm happy with this. Good. And... oh, now we're out of money again. Well, that's good enough for now. Got Asbel shiny new sword. And hopefully... Pascal got a title, I love that. How's our kit? Oh, we have no life bottles. I probably should have checked that before I did all the dualizing. That's alright. Is there other junk I can sell? Maybe some old equipment? Those seem like pretty good pieces of equipment. Now, actually, Ocean's Blue would not be that good for any of them, but it's worth money, so I can sell that. I would say, though, like, it strikes me as a really interesting question to be considering, this idea of how to read age, especially in very stylized genres like JRPG, and even frame it this way, right? Ask the question, in which context should we read age literally, and in which context should we read it allegorically? Because I think, at least in some games, that's what it comes down to. Sometimes, like, I know personally, I can glean a lot of insight and, like, lessons and value from playing through a game and seeing characters who are my exact age and thinking about, wow, how does my life right now and what I'm working through relate to them? Like, that was part of what was so interesting and challenging to me about playing the Tales of Symphonia remaster and seeing that I was, like, literally the same age that Persea was when she finally admitted at her sister's grave at the end that she was 28 years old when time was going to start moving for her again. But then other games, such as perhaps, you know, we're talking about with Graces, we can get a lot of those same insights, but only if we interpret the ages through a layer of allegory or sort of metaphor, where we don't want to think of them as that age so much as at a certain stage in their development. All right. Neophyte Smith. Well, we've got some titles. We've got, I would say, a passable kit. And we're heading back to the Enclave. And I think we can fast jump, so much the better. I would also invite us, just as we continue working onto the game, to hold on to that intuition and see whether it's something that can even help us in like reading what the game is thinking about. Because, I mean, at least so far in the game, I would also suggest that it doesn't seem like the game wants you to buy that they're this immovably tight friendship triangle, to use your wonderful turn of phrase, Pottery. Like, I think there's a fair reading for us to consider, according to which a lot of the tension and struggle that is happening with Sophie not knowing how to make sense of things is that she had this experience that she felt like was formative, but the bonds that it seems to be demanding of her and the obligations it's imposing upon her kind of don't seem to be the right-sized fit for the kind of experience that she had. So kind of like the friendship is reaching beyond its own logical extension. Yeah, true. Very good point, Grail. Yep. There are cases of some of the other characters calling them out on it. Yeah, and even some of those skits, like now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like it would be totally fair to read a few of them in the reminiscences when other characters are there of like, hey, do you remember that time where like for 48 hours you hung out with the prince and you got really attached to that for some reason? So I think there are a few different perspectives on it, even internally to the story. And we're back. Yeah, I think that's a really provocative way of thinking about it, Pottery. I'll call back. We haven't had this theme in a while, but remember, one of the things that we thought about a lot as we rolled into the adulthood arc was the idea of coping with trauma. And I feel like one less obvious way that you could read that coping with trauma into Asbel, as you say, is in an attempt in a childhood which was really insecure and unsafe in many ways, in terms of having a father who put unfair, oppressive expectations on him, and a town that kind of saw him as a master as opposed to just a person, and his relationship with Sharia, who's kind of both inside and outside his world. Like, maybe he's trying to, as you say, will this kind of safety of a firm friendship into being, just to kind of give himself a locus of control and understanding in that tumultuous period of his life. Chocolate fountain for 2 skits after the archive. All right. Oh, the scare quotes around 2 scares me. We shall, yes. But this is a perfect point in the cadence of the story, I would say, for us to be putting a bunch of pins in a bunch of different topics just to keep in mind, because we've seen a lot of it unfold, but also, as with any good JRPG, a lot of it unfolding has been set up for what will come to pass. I mean, we're going into the super special off-limits library, so how could that not be the case?
I imagined that a place called the Archive of Wisdom would be more like a library.
That's what I was saying.
Oh, we're chock full of wisdom around here. We just don't store it on paper. Oh my gosh, I never actually thought I'd come here. I'm so excited.
Oh, okay, Grail. You had me afraid that it was like another one-on-one duel. which would be interesting. I was not expecting one-on-one duels in skit form on my my bingo card for Graces, but there you go. Speaking of unusual things that it adds to its texture.
Okay, let's see what we can learn about this Lestalia.
Hey, that looks like the machine where we saw Sophie's illusion.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same, which means if I just twang this thingy here...
What is that? Is it real?
I can see right through it. Okay, let me see. Lestalia...
All these shapes. All this science. I don't understand.
Okay, now let me just... Oh, that's great.
It's just my job 5 days a week.
So the Lestalia really does exist, but it's different from Valkanus Creus.
Hey, even if mandatory, always one of the most illuminating ones to me. That is a great question, Pottery. I would turn it back to you because I am marginally colorblind in real life, and I would say that extends to my theoretical proclivities because I don't play a lot in the world of color theory, but I'm very interested to see what you think about it, if you have any ideas there. Yeah, please edify us.
How so?
Well, it's kind of like the basis for Valkanus. Eleth is created in the Lestalia and then stored in Creus and Valkanus Creus. It also says that Valkanus exists to stabilize the Eleth produced by the Lestalia. Oh man, this is heavy.
There's something slightly unnatural about the Lestalia and the Valkanus. It's like they were almost designed.
I was totally just thinking that, Sharia. Great minds think alike.
Feels a little bit like the relationship between Blastia and air, also.
Okay, so that's what the Lestalia is. And Richard will go there next?
I know, I hate the Uno reverse because putting a question back to someone always feels like a cop-out, but I am truly interested. I know myself well enough to be humble and admit when I can't offer anything that interesting to a topic. But I would love to know. I oftentimes find myself thinking that, especially with concerns of like the aesthetics of outfit and distinctive colors in so many of these games, like they're probably trying to say something interesting with the colors, but yeah, I've never really read that much into that corner of critical theory.
Oh yeah, in fact, I'm more sure of it now than ever. Richard didn't care about the Valkanus, he just wanted the Eleth.
What happens if he absorbs the Eleth from the Lestalia?
Well, since there would be no more Eleth, I think the world would just kinda die.
That's crazy. I mean, that can't be what he's after. Could it?
If the Lestalia is at the core, we'll need a way underground. How do we get down there?
He's gonna take all the Eleth and bring it back to Darius Karlon. Oh
Let me
no.
check.
Help me.
Ah, bananas, not again.
I've been super saturated by Tales games.
The records are so darn old. Come on, you. Okay, there we go. Looks like there's an entrance at a place called World's Eye. It's not far from Warrior's Roost, actually.
Great name for a place, World's Eye.
Anything else useful? Lambda.
Ooh, there's that name again. Yeah, and see, for all the times and all of the reading that I've done about Breaking Bad, like I've never come across that either. So you've opened up my interest to diving into Breaking Bad in yet another totally different way, which is magic. Thank you for that.
Lambda?
There's that word again. What does it mean?
An interesting question, Grail.
looks like it's the name of someone who went after the Valkanus a long time ago, just like Richard is doing now.
Sure. And I feel like blue is a typical color palette for like courage, right? Am I making that up? I feel like the way in which Hubert has tried to like become brave and turn into his own man over time, like, again, I'm mostly talking out of my ass because I don't have the color theory, but I feel like that's something I've heard colloquially before. Pink, I couldn't tell you.
Oh wait, hold on. There's a poem or something here.
A poem?
The seed of destruction from Fodra falls to the land of three lights, sprouting its limbs to shroud the radiance. The savior of Fodra rises to wither the leaves of destruction, guarding the lights forevermore. Okay, so are we supposed to know what any of that means? Because I totally don't.
Well, I do, but I'm not going to tell you yet.
Oh, crud. There's another blank spot here.
Yeah, well, I can definitely see him seeking out like a need for security and control, like the way in which he's so kind of just anal and exacting in his desire to like regiment those around him. That seems to strike that chord with me.
Seed of destruction. Fodra. Where have I heard that?
What's that from?
Sophie, what's wrong? Are you okay?
I can almost remember, but my head hurts.
You need some fresh air. Come on, let's go outside.
Yeah, I feel like the idea of purity and birth is interesting too, because remember I called out quite a while ago something that I do know a little bit more about, the lotus flower on Asbel's coat is a very typical Buddhist symbol, and as we continue on in the story, I think there'll be a decent amount in Asbel to resonate with that idea of like a sort of transcendentalism and purity of knowledge.
I'll take care of Sophie. You guys stay here and learn what you can.
Thanks, Sharia.
No, not the symbolic palette I would think of most immediately.
This information is just too fragmented. I can only read little bits and pieces.
I mean, the way in which she's so, like, tethered to the idea of protecting her friends, I suppose we could read caring into that if we wanted to.
I might be able to repair it or whatever, but it'll probably take some time.
Do you know what happened to that Lambda guy after he attacked the Valkanus?
At this point, Grail, I feel like Automod is trolling you more so than anything.
It looks like someone jumped in and saved the day. I found a little bit about how he was stopped by something called Protos Haste. I'm guessing the seed of destruction in the poem is that Lambda dude.
Which means Protos Haste would be...
The savior of Fodra.
It makes sense. For some reason, Richard is trying to recreate the events from that poem.
I think we've learned enough. We should hurry to World's Eye.
Agreed. I'll be damned if I'm gonna let this world die.
We'll stop Richard this time. We have to.
Notice also that this is a very standard Tales case of one of my
You okay,
favorite
Sophie?
things.
Does it still hurt?
Making sense out of the current trajectory of the world and what the party has to do by interpreting an esoteric text from a time and context to which they don't have any immediate access. Thinking of things like the score or the tome of Innominat, which Luffy said, and Grimoire decipher together in Tales of Berseria. Other examples abound.
Lambda, seed of destruction, savior from Fodra. I can almost remember.
It's It's okay. Don't force it.
It feels like I have to remember, or something terrible will happen.
Something terrible?
But it's hard. I'm scared.
Yeah, it definitely strikes me too as more of a monochromatic color palette for a decent number of them, Pottery. Yeah, and yet not all of them, Grail. That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, like look at that. The remarkably blue Hubert in this shot and the pretty multicolor rest of the cast. Even now that you say white for Asbel, Pottery, I can see it, but if you asked me what color is Asbel associated with, I probably would have told you I don't really see him as tied into any particular color.
I'm fine now. I'm sorry.
We've decided to head for World's Eye.
Okay.
Don't push yourself if you're not feeling well.
No, you must take me with you, please.
Okay, but let us know if anything's wrong. We'll have to head back to Zavhert first. We can catch a ship from there.
I want to continue our journey together. If you know, you know. Chocolate fountain. Do, 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 do. People saying anything new? The Archive of Wisdom? That's in the Overseer's quarters, yes? Yeah, we just came from there. Yeah, 3 or 4 is a pretty different feel than 1, though, I would say. Like, if you're trying to go color theoretic in terms of, like, colors distinctly informing the symbolism of a character. But again, I might be talking out of school. There might be very robust theories of multicoloredness.
Man, I think about this all the time, but I sure am one lucky girl.
You sure are,
And
Pascal.
why do you say that?
If I was the Overseer, I wouldn't be able to continue my research.
Research? Do you wish to tell me that it's research that's been motivating your travels?
Yep, you cannot tell from whence we Marcians came and whither we go, or whatever.
I wouldn't have taken you for a romantic.
Overseers are chosen based on their family lineage.
She wasn't even listening.
But if I ended up having to take on that responsibility, it'd be a total pain.
I concur, as would everyone living here, I'm sure.
I hope we get to learn more about the meaning of Amarcian bloodlines, because we know from all the side quests with the glyphs, there's some deep significance to their blood, because it is, like, it's Pascal's bloodline as an Amarcian, by virtue of which she's recognized and able to form these contracts with the glyphs. And so if it's also lineage that determines the Overseer, I feel like there's an interesting undercurrent of the history of their heritage, which we still don't know yet.
The scale of this story has grown so much, I almost can't follow it anymore. Can someone please give me a recap?
King Richard's transformation has plunged.
They're all pretty
our world into a
two-toned
spiral of
hair types,
disaster.
though, aren't they?
This same
Just
story
not
came
as
up again in the
colorful as
information from the hidden
Pascal's.
Marcian archive.
It seems that King Richard is behaving just like a creature known as Lambda, who went after the Valkanists long ago.
So if we knew why that happened, we could totally figure out what's going on now. But we don't.
There was another piece to the puzzle, right?
Yes, that would be Sophie.
Could probably also do a pretty interesting comparative study on the different junctures in the plot within which this kind of background context and deep historical lore is introduced, and to what effect that happens. Because I'm thinking about, like, here, you know, at, let's say, more or less the midpoint of the story, we get this unclear background into what the protagonist is doing based on this obscure poem, versus something like Tales of Symphonia, where around the end of the second act, we get this storyteller who explains to us the history of the world in terms that are deeply familiar to us based on the story already, but we didn't know that those characters were involved in the history in the way that they were until that point, versus something like Tales of the Abyss, where the very first line of the game is a prophecy whose meaning is unclear until you get deep into the game. So it's cool to see in the overall context of the series how different games have such a similar storytelling device, but interject them at different moments and in different context to different literary effect. Oh, I must have just been distracted by talking to the NPC here last time. We didn't actually get the conversation. Glad we came back.
Hey, Pascal. What exactly is going on here?
This is a chocolate fountain.
Yeah, always good to have an
created by
explanation,
Overlook
Skit
Sears a long
Grail.
time ago.
Why would anyone need this?
You wouldn't understand, Asbel, but research is totally taxing on the old melon. When you get all sleepy and the blood sugar drops, there's nothing better than sweet chocolate.
It's so sweet. I'm awake now.
Sophie, stop. You'll ruin your appetite.
But it's so sweet. You should try some, Sharia.
All right, I'll try a little.
Chocolate as a cure for exhaustion? Sure, why not?
Hey, guys, you're kind of sort of not supposed to just stick your hands in it.
Oh, sorry. I just got scolded by Pascal.
Game over, man. Game over. Yeah, I'm triggered too, no kidding. Say any combination of Talesy words and you've got me triggered. That's my secret, Cap. I'm always triggered. Yeah, I was even thinking about it, Pottery, in terms of the conversation at Pharaoh's Crag, because there he gives some explanation. It's still not totally clear at that point. So, like, you get to know a bit of how people like Estelle relate to, like, the basic energetic flows of the world in a way that we kind of just got in terms of where Elith comes from and what this thing from the past was trying to do. Or even in Miorzo, right, where we find out, oh, this thing happened in the past. We're not totally sure what it was, but it seems kind of similar to what's going on now. So it definitely seems to have a lot of points of similarity in the structure of its explanation to the way in which things are explained and the context that's provided or not provided in Vesperia. I wanted to see if there were any new levels of this, because he said he was gonna... He lied! He said there were going to be new levels of Shot Cube. Maybe we have to come back even laterer. Think faster, dilettante. Yours is the only minigame I've enjoyed so far. Oh, I have to go back and do Magic Carta. Well, I'm sure we finally have enough cards now. But that does feel like quite a way to go. For a card game. But if it's a fun one, then...
Lostalia. Must get to the Lostalia.
Ooh.
Once we're there, our dream will come true.
Ooh.
Right? We're the only ones who can save this world.
It's a dark, unexpected mirror to Tales of Zestiria.
This world is ravaged by war. We can restore it. We must.
Ooh, you have my attention. Yeah, that approach of multiple moments of exploration, I really have come to enjoy that more in replaying and studying these games, Pottery. It's a bear when you're trying to marshal together all of those individual moments for single complete explanations in something like a comprehensive analysis of a game. But in terms of what the game is talking about and wrestling with, I think it does really nicely fold into the whole ethos of the praxis of it, where the characters are only concerned with the explanations that are directly pertinent to what it is that they're working through at the moment. And so, as you say, I think oftentimes by virtue of that approach to understanding their place in the world, they're only kind of trying to uncover enough of the mystery to orient themselves according with their current struggles. Not like they want to know the full and complete nature of the world just for the sake of it. They want to do whatever they have to next in order to solve the problem with which they're directly concerned. And I think there's a lot to recommend that. Closest save point on the Marcian side, we have 2 skits. All right, perfect. Thank you, Grail. I think that's just back down this way, right? Maybe this direction? I think it's down here. There it is. A lady's prerogative.
Hey guys, do you have any idea why the Overseer quit talking to people?
Poisson did say that, didn't she? It struck me as odd too.
Pursuing the answer will doubtless prove a waste of time. But if you're so curious, why not ask Pascal?
You rang?
Why doesn't the Overseer speak in public anymore?
Because after all these years, she just recently learned she had a heavy accent and got really embarrassed about it.
Wow, that really was a waste of time.
Yep, some old dude she had the hots for pointed it out to her.
Just as I said, a complete waste of time.
Please, Pascal, tell us more.
I was not expecting it to go that way. It is funny, too, as a kind of counterpoint to Miorzo, because I think Miorzo has a lot of functional continuity with the Amarcian Enclave in terms of the sort of explanations that we were just considering. But notice in Miorzo, you walk in and talk with the Elder pretty much right away, and he's the one who shows you the hidden lore of Miorzo, which sets the next events of Vesperia in motion. Whereas, as Pascal was just pointing out and the party was wrestling with, you literally don't see the Elder who is putatively in charge of the Amarcian Enclave. It's a night and day. Oh, I do enjoy that. Man, there is nothing like a great display cabinet for one's library of any kind arriving. I know that joy so well. I've been eyeing a lot of bookcases and various display cases on Wayfair for quite a while for the same reason. Ooh. Well, if you have any good photos for showcasing that you'd like to share with the group at some point, I'm sure we'd love to see it. Yeah. A gamer and consumer and thinker is the sum of their collection of artifacts of knowledge and art and experiences.
So this Protos Haste stopped the Lambda disaster?
Yes. Why are you asking?
So if Richard is trying to wipe out all of the world's Elith, just like this Lambda did, doesn't that mean that we'll need a Protos Haste on our side to defend against him?
Yes.
Do you think Richard knows that his actions are going to eradicate all life from our world?
What if he does?
Huh?
What if Richard does understand? What would you do?
Well, I guess I would have to... What could I do?
It never stops. I'm telling you, it feels like a slow and thorough exploration of the entire world, just dwelling in a country and then moving on. It was helpful to me, I'll say, just in thinking about that last skit, to have that conversation we did about Asbel perhaps trying to will that friendship into existence as a way of coping with or mitigating his childhood trauma. Because since thinking about that, now I do really feel like he's wrestling with the difficulties of what it would mean to confront Richard, not just because like he knew Richard in his childhood, but because to do violence to that relationship would perhaps be undoing the sort of one sense of safety and a firm attachment that he modeled in his own mind from that period in his childhood life. So it's like if that comes undone, then maybe everything else comes undone, you know? Well, in my experience, that can be a nice way of just thinning your collection so it just has all the best parts. Especially if you donate them, which is awesome. It's like just a net benefit to everyone, I would think. Good for you for doing that, buddy.
I hope I was of some use.
Looking for specifics on qualities? First, you must learn how to raise the rank of a quality by dualizing. One thing you might notice is that if you dualize two 5-letter qualities, for example, it usually leads to a 6-letter quality. That is the first hint towards producing better qualities. So longer words equal better qualities. Interesting to be learning that so late game, but that does give me something firm to glom onto as we continue to dualize. And that's the kind of useful datum that sticks in one's mind. So I will try to focus on that as we move on with dualizing. All right, to the inn. Oh, I wanted to check Asbel's titles too, because I think he learned... Yeah, he did learn the last art on that title tree. Are there any other new arts we can give him? Yes! Fantastic. Man, we spent all that time getting kitted up for nothing. We didn't even have any big bads on the way to the Enclave. But better to make the investment earlier rather than later.
If we assume the Lestalia and the Valkanus were artificially created, the question becomes, who created them?
I would assume that the Amarcians created them.
As a joke.
The control units and ruins we've discovered are totally the work of Amarcians, but I don't think we're responsible for the Valkanus themselves.
But then, who besides the Amarcians would even be capable of such an achievement?
We just checked the Archive of Wisdom. There were records about Valkanus control units, but nothing about building a Valkanus Creus.
Seems we are still lacking a crucial piece of information.
Indeed. And I suspect this missing information may prove critical to stopping King Richard.
I'll raise the obvious point of comparison that I'm sure you're shocked I didn't bring up earlier, but as we continue into this next chapter of the game that invites us to work our way into the planet's core, we also obviously ought to keep in mind the nature of the core in Tales of the Abyss and Aldrin. Because off the top of my head, I think that's the only other Tales game that I've played at this point, at least, that is centrally concerned with the core of a planet, which is such an interesting idea and so distinctive that I'm all the more interested in seeing it come up in more than one Tales game. Oh, it was just for that skit. Awesome. I thought we had to actually rest at the end. Let's do it. Off we go. To the port. That's right. I want to continue to keep an eye out for whether we can make more plushies for that little girl through dualizing. I just wanted to check. I don't think we picked up any more for her. No. Oh, Lara. Well, at least we have given you a lot of friends. Hope to give you more before all is said and done. What a nice, uniquely Tales expression of kindness to be able to collect a bunch of novel Easter egg plushies and use them to make the life of a bedridden girl just that little bit better. Oh, good reminder, Grail. Thank you. Yeah, I think we did pick up at least one or two. We'll see if it was enough for that old man and his insatiable desire to see Carta cards. I guess they're just called Carta, right? It's like saying ATM machine. Speaking of Breaking Bad, I guess. I am the Carta King! Show me your magic Carta cards. Oh, but he says it, so maybe it's not like that. I feel like the game is ambiguous, though, because I've also seen people just talk about Carta. Give you something good in return. You're very close. Come back once you have a few more cards. We still don't have enough yet, alas. Yeah, the way they do variations on this theme is so cool.
Can you take us there?
Sakuraba-san, one hell of a composer.
If you've got the coin, I've got the boat. But I don't see the point. There ain't nothing up there.
Let us worry about that.
We have urgent business on an island in that area.
Say, you must be the ones that government fellow was talking about. Yeah, I'm supposed to give you whatever you want.
Kurt?
Sounds like the overseers pulled some strings for us.
Ah, the Marcians. That makes more sense.
We can make sail whenever you're ready. Just let me know, yeah?
Let's rock. Let's rock. Today. Oh, I guess I wasn't being fair about planet cores. The wedge in that second arc of Tales of Arise is kind of core adjacent. But in terms of being concerned with the core proper, Abyss and Graces are the first examples that come to mind for me. First and only, I should say. World's Eye. Alright, let's do it. Onward, friendos. We'll be departing shortly. Thank you, Grail. And we're off. Oh my god, it's a sea dragon! Oh no, wrong Tales game. Not the merfish.
Oh, hey,
Oh
Sophie.
god.
Checking out the view?
Still the wrong Tales game, but a different wrong Tales game.
Can I ask you something? Is Richard still your friend?
Yeah, Sophie, he is. But not just me. He's your friend as well, right? Remember the pact of friendship we made together?
But last time we tried, we couldn't do it.
Well then, we'll just make another pact once Richard is back to normal. As long as we care for each other, the pact can be remade.
Can we still remake it if I defeat him?
Are you saying you're going to do that to protect us?
If we do the pact of friendship with Richard again, will it make these feelings go away? I have this feeling that if I don't destroy him, I'll lose my other friends. But Richard is my friend too, so why do I feel this way?
You've done everything you can to protect us, Sophie. There's no need for you to shoulder everything alone. Let me take care of Richard. He's a good person. I know he is. There must be a reason for what he's doing.
Asbel.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting going on here to just follow up on what we've been talking around for a while. This idea of the tension just between, like, the impulse to seek a kind of safety from a firm and stable understanding of your relationships with other people across time as a kind of guiding or orienting beacon through which to navigate your life, in contrast with the inevitability of change and those relationships evolving. So like the twin poles of seeking safety versus seeking to be authentically engaged with the present.
So this
That
is
strikes me
World's
as a
Eye.
lot of what Sophie was wrestling with in that scene. Interesting too how many reflective conversations she has just looking out at the water during their marine travels. I'm not sure whether there's anything to that, but I've noticed it as we've gotten further into the story. Wow, sounds like a very cool book collection, Doug. Yeah, and I mean, Sophie quite literally doesn't understand the concept of friendship, right? But I think that to me is also part of, like, perhaps the interesting interplay between the literal age of them as adolescents and also, like, the symbolic content of what they're working through at this part of their lives. Because I do think, to me at least, one of the things that is interesting to study in our own lives evolving over time, and that JRPGs that study characters across time like this one can really be useful in representing, is how a lot of the concepts according to which we orient ourselves, like friendship, are something of a moving target, and we have to sort of constantly be updating what they mean to us and what we need to seek out if we want to prioritize those things. So even the way in which Asbel is struggling with it, like, on the one hand, it seems like he has more of a grasp of it than Sophie does. On the other hand, I feel like there's a lot of continuity between the two of them.
It's not very big. So where's the entrance to the Listalia?
Let's snoop around and see what we can find.
Yeah, an interesting clash of old and new, Grail. I noticed that too. Friend to the end and conflicted at heart. Yeah, I can imagine that would be a really interesting lens into world history, Doug. History is definitely not my strong suit, but what I've grown to appreciate in my later years is enjoying history through the selective lenses of my friends who enjoy it and tell me the interesting stories from it. Lunar Requiem. That looks like a mystic art if I've learned to read these symbols. Does that mean Sophie got one too? No. Forced to fight against a friend with whom she swore friendship, she feels heavily conflicted versus Asbel, who is resolved to do whatever it takes to settle things with his former friend. Interesting, because even that, like, the names of the titles, you might think they're diametrically opposed, but their descriptions, I would say, almost sum to the same thing. Like, they're both wrestling in their own ways with their attachment to Richard versus what it is that they feel they have to do in relation to Richard now. No, it's in the ether, right? I would say. I mean, maybe part of it is the fact that we've all played this game before. We all being myself and Pottery and Grail, but I think it's also just one of those beautiful JRPGs that is very thoughtful in terms of having the tide of its story ebb and flow in such a way that we just feel the right themes in the ether right when they're going to come to the fore. it would be beautiful just to think about the finer tuned mechanics of how it is they manage that, because it really does seem like almost a magic trick to me sometimes.
Did we beat you here, Richard? Or have you already come and gone? Either way, I will stop you.
One of those solo conversation skits. Always so rare, and not something you can count on in every game, but I always love them when they show up. My keystone for that is always thinking back to Lloyd during the pursuit of Mythos and Colette in the Tower of Salvation once everyone else has left the party. There's nothing so isolating and solitary as a skit with no one else talking. A monologue, you might call it.
Hey, this must lead to the Lostalia, but it's been sealed off.
Well, it looks like we beat Richard here.
Look up there.
Richard, what happened to you?
What's happening?
So much
I don't think his
Elith?
body can handle all of that Elith he's been absorbing.
He's a living bomb.
Richard, stop! Stop right there!
Shut up! All of you just shut up! I've come too far to let you stand in my way!
I'm gonna pause real quick because I don't think it's gonna be easy to see the animation with what comes next, and I may have already paused it too late for us to see and appreciate it in this cutscene. But one thing that strikes me as really interesting, just talking about like little graphical effects that can actually make a pretty interesting difference to the experience of story, kind of in terms of what we were talking about earlier with respect to the models of characters and things like that, is just the way in which the darkness radiating from Richard is animated. I don't know if you get the sense, but the way in which I read it is really interesting, because at first glance, it almost seems like it's just emanating from him like an object that's on fire. But if you look more closely, to my eye, it almost seems like the beams of dark energy are kind of encircling and imprisoning him, almost like a kind of cage that he's trapped inside of. And just such a subtle representation with the animation, but what a cool way to show how he's like, at the same time that he's letting out all of this hatred and negativity to the world, also whatever this inexplicable source of it is in him is just further like imprisoning him and walling him off from everything that he values, including his friends. I love that.
Focus, be tight.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, Gray. Like, if you can see it both ways, I think it's cool that the game allows you to see it both ways, and then it wants you to kind of see both of those at once.
Your blood will fall like petals!
Maybe part of what's funny about that, Grail, is like Richard is an actual king who has, you know, knightly forces and people he commands and things like that. So the idea that he just grabs a few random free-roaming animals and uses them as his mounts and entourage is pretty funny. I can see the humor in that. Great name for a great theme. It's a great description of this character. Sakuraba-san, we don't deserve you. No! Oh no! How has he gotten 2 and we've gotten none? I call foul, sir. At least this battle is possible. Ugh, Kurt! Ugh, ugh. It's pretty fun. I like the flow of it.
Sorry about that.
When you revive him before his body hits the ground. That's what they call teamwork.
I will race you. Okay.
Stop trying to use that dumb aura. We have Nova powers. What is that dark sword you can channel? Well, I guess it's the perplexed sword, isn't it? Asked and answered. Yeah, I love that observation, Grail, and I definitely feel it in the fight. Just the way in which each one of his moves, like, radiates more power than it can contain at any single moment. Like, you do really feel the weight of all the actions he's been taking in the course of the game up to this point, even when they've been outside our perspective. I didn't like that. It's like Sonic Thrust, but evil. What? Even I'll laugh at that line reading. Yeah, terrifying, isn't it? It's like so impactful and sufficiently beyond human ken to be really intimidating. Yeah, we will see. This is definitely the part of the game where we'll start getting some revelations and clearer context, Doug, so keep tuned in. When pairing up qualities to dualize, always keep an eye out for effects that are highlighted in yellow. When you see that, it means the effect's rank will go up. Some rare qualities might even influence more than one effect. Fantastic. So see, that's one of those things where I had the memory of the yellow text being a categorically good indication earlier in the game, but they didn't tell us until now, so I didn't know whether to spec into that or not. Now we know. Yes, yeah, that's a good catch, Grail. I hadn't consciously processed that, but you're absolutely right. Ooh, that voice. Thank you, Grail. Sorry, I had to defeat your
There's nothing
fave.
else we can do, except grant him a quick and merciful end.
No, wait, stop! I can hear his voice. I hear Richard's voice. Is that you? Richard! The pain is too much. Help me, Asbel. Yes, I'm right here for you. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Don't kill me. Please, Asbel. You are my friend. Who's there? Oh, it's you again. Protos.
Protos Haste?
We saw that name in the Archive of Wisdom.
No, you're wrong. I am...
I'm Sophie.
Richard. Let's make a friendship pact. Then everything will be okay.
Oh, Sophie. Die.
This is such an amazingly directed scene.
Sophie!
Took the words right out of my mouth, Pottery. Yeah.
What the?
Sophie! Sophie! Talk to me! Please open your eyes! No!
The time has come. I have finally arrived. And now there is no one who can stand in my way!
Oh man, it's like way scarier than I expected it to be, actually.
Everyone run! If we don't move now, then we won't make it out of here alive!
Pascal!
Sophie! Asbel, we have to go! Damn!
Ooh. It's like an evil great tree. Reminds me a little of the warped regeneration of the great tree in the middle of Tales of Symphonia before they figure out how to actually fix things. Pottery goes to Zaude, I go to Giant Carlon Tree. You have two options. I loved everything about that. Yeah, I mean, I think we could do a whole breakdown of that whole scene, but I think I just want to, for the time being, pick out your point, Pottery, because I think it really resonates to me with a lot of what we've been saying about the idea of roles. Importantly, the idea of titles in terms of how characters are described and how things like a description or a name, like Sophie being the name that is given to this person at the beginning of this story, gives them a whole modality according to which they can engage with people and the world in a way that resonates, I think, a lot with things like the idea of relationships to one another that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 wrestles with, by the notion of classes and how people are able to adopt these different uses that are represented by one another. And also even what I wrote about Tales of Vesperia in terms of people helping others to actualize themselves by figuring out the roles in which they want to be and the stories they want to tell before they're then able to situate themselves within communities. But yeah, I think there's something really powerful and moving, and at that moment that we just saw, strained and heartbreaking about the idea that someone like poor Sophie, who I think is really representative of a lot of people in this story and something that a lot of us go through, is just so caught between these two competing interpretations of herself that seem to her in that moment to totally exhaust the options that she has for ways in which to relate to other people. And so one of those, this idea of the cryptic thing from the past that is designed to destroy Lambda, is compelling her to destroy and undo relationships that she cares about. And the other one, even if it does seem relatively superficial and transitory, etched in the past, like we talked about, but is a friendship pact that has the ability to bond people together rather than tearing things apart, you can see how she would use the latter as a gesture, trying to cement her relationship with others in a way that can create something safe and positive when the alternative is just destruction. So much the worse, of course, that she only seems to have those two options available to herself, but the game's not yet done, and especially with the way in which it's wrestling with how relationships evolve a long time, I think we have reason to hope that the characters will be given different modes of engaging with each other that will empower them to think about new roles that they might inhabit in the world moving forward from here. I guess you could also go with the Nominat. That's always a fair option. Yeah, it was definitely, like you asked, I wonder how much of that is Richard Grail. It really felt like vanishingly little of Richard, and all the more pain being like the object that is Richard becoming more manipulative and more manipulated by whatever that other thing is, in a way that just drew Sophie in only to devastate her and break her heart.
Sophie! Sophie! Come on, Sophie! Wake up!
Her wounds are healed now. I just don't understand what's going on.
Sophie!
Thank goodness you're awake. I'm so glad.
Asbel. Sharia. What happened? To me?
Richard attacked us. You've been unconscious for a while.
What happened to him?
He was enveloped by some kind of strange cocoon. And we don't really know what became of him.
Richard.
Sophie, try to hold on.
What happened to everyone? Where are you? Everything's a blur.
What?
Where did you go? I can't see you.
Sophie, tell us, what's wrong?
We're right here, Sophie.
Can you see anything?
Your faces are getting blurry. I can't see.
This could be an after effect from the attack. If we don't help her, she might lose her sight.
No.
It's no use. I can't seem to heal her with either arts or medicine.
Or even symbolically, like, this might be a bridge too far, but the way in which she was, like, brutalized by Richard back into her destined role to fight this thing, Lambda, and denied the opportunity to make a friendship pact. It's like that hit her so hard, figuratively and literally, that now she doesn't even have the ability to see her friends, let alone relate to them. Like, that other option has been at least temporarily taken off the table for her.
We've got to do something. What else can we try?
Well, she won't get any better just lying on the ground. Let's find an inn or something.
Oh, don't worry. You know what stream you're on, right, Grail? You better believe as we get further into Lambda, we'll do plenty of fun, symbolic analysis of everything that might be once we learn more about this mysterious thing that has just been named. Well, that has just been given a little more context. I suppose it was named quite a bit ago. I meant to say that I had a feeling that's what you were talking about when you said you felt like the act break happened there. It's interesting. I mean, I feel like if we're trying to break up the acts in terms of like where the writers intended it, or however we want to talk about it in terms of like the designed underlying structure of it, like the confrontation with Richard in Lot has a big cinematic animation, and this other confrontation with Richard has a similarly big cinematic animation. And it does seem like there's a natural cadence to the game that can be broken down according to the different confrontations with Richard and what they represent and how the context has changed at that point. So that does make sense to me. I feel like you could do an interesting reading, though, where you could almost do kind of a deconstruction of it and think about it in terms of like, okay, in terms of what the party is learning and how they're coming to become a community unit on their own terms, where the act breaks to delineate that, as opposed to the delineation of the plot that puts Asbel and Sophie in conflict with Richard, and then maybe they might skew a little differently. That was a bit more of what I had in mind in terms of Malik being welcomed into the fold of the party and what that represented for him and what we could extend to the other characters, but that's definitely more inventive, I think, than the standard way in which to read them according to the game. Yeah, absolutely, Grail. That is what I was trying to say there.
How's she doing?
A little better. At least she's sleeping now.
Sophie.
Hey, Asbel. This is gonna sound weird, but I don't think Sophie's human. At least not like us.
What was your first clue?
Don't yell at me. She's just not reacting like a normal person, you know?
Also, she mysteriously materialized in the same field more than once. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but
Human or not, she's still in pain.
I don't think that was Pascal's point
If
at
you're
all, dude.
suggesting we just abandon her,
Oh, jeez, what's wrong with you? No, I'm trying to help.
Read the room, Asbel.
Do you remember when I mentioned Phodra back at the Archive of Wisdom?
I remember you saying that Proto's haste came from there.
And that Proto's haste stopped Lambda from destroying the Valkanus.
Well, if Richard is right and Sophie is Proto's haste, then there might be a way to help her. But we'll have to take her to Phodra. Look, guys, if arts don't work and medicines don't work, then we're about out of options. Of course, I can't promise this'll work either. Richard could have been lying or crazy or whatever. And the records in the archive were totally old. So yeah, it might not work. But I think it's the only shot we have.
how would we get to Phodra? I can't just let Sophie suffer like this. It's my turn to save her for once. So please, get me to Phodra. I'll do whatever it takes.
That was a nice quiet moment of growth for Asbel, I would say, from the childhood picture of him just trying to kind of put on the costume of traditional masculine bravado, saying, oh, you're the girl, I have to protect you, whereas now they have a much more realized relationship, and he's more resolved in terms of what it takes for an actual friend to stand up for someone else and save them in their time of need.
And what? The rest of us will just sit here and wait for your return? Everyone feels the same as you, Asbel.
Wait, are you sure?
Pascal is just the best, and no one can tell me
Of
otherwise.
course, we've come this far, haven't we?
Thanks, everyone.
How can you be that excited all the
Then
time?
let's get to Fodra and figure out how to save our friend.
Right.
Agreed. If we're lucky, we might even learn something about what happened to Richard.
What do you mean?
I think Richard is connected to that Lambda guy.
Wait, you do?
Yeah, so we should keep our eyes open and try to learn as much as we can. But first we need to go back to the Archive of Wisdom, because I totally don't know how to get to Fodra. But once I figure that out, we'll head there toot sweet.
For a place literally called the Archive of Wisdom, I feel as though the gang spent vanishingly little time there, so I'm not surprised they have to go back.
There you
It's
are,
like,
Pascal.
that is a funny mirror to like actual research methodology though, where like you go to a library saying, I'm going to learn everything about this subject. And then you pick up maybe 2 books and read a few passages from them and say, all right, I've learned enough about this subject. I'll never have to go back to this library.
The captain said you were in trouble, so we came here right away.
I think the Elder has finally graced us with her presence.
The Overseer has concluded her discussions with Chancellor Eigen.
Yeah, maybe that's quiet growth in Pascal too, Doug, now that you mention it.
Fendel has pledged us their full support.
The information you seek will not be found in the Archive of Wisdom.
Ah, she does have a ridiculous accent.
Instead, you will need to visit our other archive, the Lost Archive.
It's in the Forbidden Zone.
We have another archive?
Of sort. Long ago, you see, we Marcians lived in a place far from our current home. When we left, we were unable to bring all that we had acquired, and so some items were sealed away.
Oh, that's cool. So where is this other archive?
In a Stratton city called Sable Isole.
I guess it is fair also because, you know, as we've learned more about Pascal, it's evident that as socially uncouth as she is really interested in learning things for the sake of knowledge and understanding, which was what brought her to Sophie in the first place. And clearly she is now learning everything that she could possibly want to about the background of Sophie and the history of the world and everything through means such as the archive. So perhaps she's simply moved beyond the tactile and been edified in other ways.
It won't be easy to reach Sable Isole from here. Fendel and Strata aren't on good terms, and no ships sail between here and there.
It is already taken care of. The Overseer has graciously arranged for Chancellor Eigen to provide a ship. It is waiting in the harbor and ready to sail upon your word.
All right, so we are backtracking a little bit now, but very late in the game.
Thank you. This will be a great help.
We will watch over your friend Sophie while you are gone. There is no need for concern.
Thank you, Poisson. Hang in there, Sophie. We're going to make you better. I promise.
Yep, they did meet the Chancellor Fendel last time. Oof. Well, except for this hidden archive. Your ship is ready and waiting. When your preparations are complete, please make your way to the port. It was a really fun and rewarding one, Doug. Yeah, and a nice one to watch too, because we were reflecting. It was something of a short story, focusing especially on Malik and his past and the way in which that breathed context into the present. So I would say sits pretty well as a standalone stream also.
If what Pascal says is true, then that means...
Asbel, I know what you're thinking, and you don't have to feel that way. It doesn't matter what we find out. To us, Sophie will always be Sophie, right?
Rose is Rose.
Whatever truths we learn will only help us understand Sophie better. Even with everything that's happened, I'm just glad that I had a chance to get to know her. She's meant the world to us, and nothing is going to change that.
You're right. All the things we've done, all the memories we share. We have to protect Sophie. It's the only option.
That's more like it. That look fits you much better than when you're down.
You're really sweet, Sharia.
Huh? Where did that come from?
Such a different color from March's approach in Dawn of the New World. The same voice actress. Yeah, thank you for the reminder, Grail. We still don't have access to that, though, right? That's a post-game thing, isn't it? This is perhaps an obvious inference to draw, but following up on what I was saying about the constraints of roles, according to which the characters assign themselves a place in the world, notice the game itself is giving us sort of a subtle lesson in how to overcome that in terms of using a wide variety of roles to give characters basic abilities without constraining them to any roles, because again, notice what we were talking about earlier in this very stream and what we were talking about last time in terms of titles. We need to be pretty active in keeping in mind all of the different apt descriptions of these characters that we've unlocked and actually seeing them through all of these lights as represented by assigning the titles to them in order to actually develop their strategies and abilities more holistically in a way that inheres to them without depending on the assignment of any single title. So we get all these abilities, and then we don't have to think about Asbel just as his brother's keeper or just as the Sword of the King. He can be more than the sum of all of these, and yet who he is exactly because he has spent time to think about himself in the context provided by all of these. Oh, what a perfect little Talesism. Are we talking about titles or toidles? Come for the philosophy, stay for the jokes. We've got it all. Oh, I must have just missed it then, Grail, because I remember you talking about it, but I felt like I tried at least to check it out, and I was not able to, but I must have just not made a sufficient effort. I don't think I want to make a sufficient effort right now, though. I think that's as well advised as fighting the Rokugan. Now my brain just wants to go to a dark, convoluted place about the influence of turtles on the dynamics of role assignment and title attribution in Tales games. Maybe if we lean on the deep turtles lore from Vesperia and Cisteria, we can get something. Oh, that's right. I was misremembering. You were talking about that path in the desert. Yes. Now I do remember. I thought I was thinking of something different that I think just doesn't exist.
What are you doing outside? You should be in bed.
I'm sorry. She insisted on seeing you. I'm coming with you. I can't stay in bed while you fight for me. And I won't get better here. I want to be with you. I won't get in the way. I promise. So please, please let me stay.
God, the way she's pulsing, it's like her life energy is about to dwindle into nothing.
All right, but no heroics, okay?
What an interesting effect.
Thanks, Asbel.
Kind of the opposite of all of that dark energy exploding outward from Richard.
This is a letter from Chancellor Eigen to the President of Strata. I believe the Chancellor wishes to mend ties between the two countries. If ever all countries needed to work together, that time is now.
We understand. We'll make sure the letter arrives safely. The quickest way to Sable Azole is through Ol Ray, so we should head there first.
But we have seen her act as a shining beacon of light before, importantly, in her previous confrontations with Richard and that still as yet not fully understood monster in the childhood arc.
They won't be pleased to see a Fendolian
So it's not as
ship
if it's
sail in the
without
port,
precedent.
but I'm sure we can explain the situation.
Imagine sailing from Fendel to Strata. These are indeed interesting times.
My man.
And this is for you, Pascal.
Oh, cool! This little doodad will let us send messages back and forth.
I'll contact you immediately if anything changes.
All right, let's get going.
A letter from the Chancellor of Fendel to the President of Strata, proposing cooperation. Starting to feel a little Tales of the Abyss in the collaboration between countries. Also a theme in Vesperia, in case Pottery was jumping to the keyboard. A pigeon-like mechanical device received from Poisson for long-distance communication. The Pensive Sage! My man, I love that title. Oh, you knew I'd love that title. The captain muttered to himself as they traveled. Old friend, the times are really changing. Oh, Kurt. And a new mystic art for him too, alright. Holds up as one of the most unexpected and jarring moments in that game to me, Grail. No, that definitely wouldn't be you, Pottery. As we established earlier in this scene, Vesperia is on the top of your list for games that you need to play because you've clearly never played them before. This is the boarding dock for the ferry between Zavhert Port and the port to Zavhert. Would you like to board? I would, please. We'll be departing shortly. That's when we would know that Pottery had been replaced by his replica in the chat. Talk about if you only had one question to determine whether someone was really themselves or a body snatcher. Awesome. Thank you, Grail.
Are you okay, Sophie?
Clearly not.
You need help?
I'm fine. Thank you both.
I feel like an easy go-to would be just I'd ask you about your latest challenge run in whatever game you're playing, Grail. I feel like that's a safe choice.
We're on the ocean. I can't see it, but I can smell it.
I don't know what mine would be either. Probably something about my philosophy of games, I guess, if we're going that way.
We rode a boat together when you were little, didn't we, Asbel?
Yeah, when we went to Verona.
You wanted to sail around the world with everyone someday. Your dream came true, Asbel. Though I haven't recovered my memory yet.
So we have dreams coming up once again, quickly coalescing into a motif in this later section, it looks like. So remember that came up with Richard, Richard / whatever the hell is in Richard, thinking about achieving its dream and ending war.
Still, I'm happy we can travel together.
Sophie, you should get some sleep.
I'm fine. Everything is blurry, but I see lots of blue. I wonder if I'll lose my sight completely. I'd miss seeing all my friends. I guess it's good that I can still remember you. Sharia has pretty hair, and Asbel has a kind smile. Remembering these things makes me happy, even if I won't see them anymore. So I'll be fine.
Oh, Sophie.
We'll find a way to heal you. I promise.
Even if I'm not like you?
What do you mean?
Nothing. It's nothing.
That's another very Zen reflection on meaning, this retreat from the perceptible world to the inner experiences of how we know and recollect the world, to eventually, that experience of what, in Buddhism is called the no self, which is prior to any kind of attachment or relational existence between an ego and the world beyond itself. So especially for the character that has been most directly wrestling with reincarnation,
These jerks really
right
know
on
how to
point.
make a girl feel welcome.
Considering we're the first ship from Fendel to ever dock here, it's hard to blame them.
Fair point.
Lieutenant Oswell, sir. Fools, stand down at once. I'm terribly sorry, Lieutenant. If we'd had known it was you, this never would have happened.
Apologies are unnecessary. You were right to be wary of such a vessel. Now, please tell us where to find the President.
He's traveling here to interview witnesses who've seen the situation at World's Eye. He's slated to stop at Sable Izoli on his way.
Excellent. Then we can deliver this letter to him in person. Let's hurry to Sable Izole before we miss him.
Sable Izole, away! Embracer of Truth. So many titles. Oh, and Sophie is unavailable for battle. I was wondering whether her eyesight would impact the ability to use her. Notice too, I don't think it would be that much of a reach to think about the way in which characters are pretty rapidly getting a bunch of new titles right after Sophie had this big confrontation with Richard, throwing the question of the roles in which we occupy right to the forefront of the game's consciousness. To say nothing of the fact that the titles they're rapidly earning are also tied to new mystic arts, giving them yet further levels of ability and ways in which to express themselves with finality in battle. Like they're opening up the aperture for different levels of meaning and interpreting themselves. We're looking for the sunken ship's cargo. Oh. Alright, this seems like the side quest, yep. No, absolutely, and I'm sure Pottery will mention it if I don't, but also a structural similarity to that moment in Tales of Vesperia, where you can't use Carol for a certain spell of time for deeply significant reasons. Oh, Garden of Innocence, is that the mystic art that Sharia just got on that title, Grail? I read that as part of it, though, right? It's like, it's so poignant in the moment, but then the way in which that sequence resolves is almost like he was faking it or something, or being like a little melodramatic because he wanted to be the hero, which is also very Carol, right? So I think that's part of what makes it fun for me. And turns what would otherwise be a really like almost sad or more like contemplative moment than it ought to be into a lighthearted and uplifting moment for the little boss. If the ship sank around here, we should see some of the remains. Ha! Nothing like making an existing art based. This reminds me of a certain training session. You mean, yep. Ooh, more flashbacks. In order to adapt, one must always be prepared for every possible contingency. Don't think you're safe just because this is a training session. Is that Victoria? I honestly didn't think she'd be back at this point. The prognosticators said this storm will be unusually fierce. Should we really be out here? I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned, but all we can do now is trust in our students. We have far fewer knights and instructors than we'd planned. If something were to go wrong... Ah! What was that? Someone fell overboard. Who is it? What's their name and class? I'll go. Where are they? No need, sir. This guy already pulled her out. You. Oh, you there. Help this woman to her cabin. Do you think to be praised for this action? I don't know. I just wanted to help. And what if you had needed rescuing as well? What then? I was just following Captain Malik's advice, ma'am. Always be prepared for any possible contingency. You were prepared for her to fall overboard? Well, not her specifically. But in a storm like this, it seemed reasonable to expect that such an event might happen. So you risked your own life to play hero. Is that it? Sir, I wasn't trying to do anything. I just... Silence! No more excuses. As punishment, you will scrub every inch of the Academy's floors. Am I clear? Yes, ma'am. Trying to listen to his teacher's good advice, yeah. Hold. What was your name again? Asbel Lant, sir. Oh, the first time Malik acknowledged him, saw the fiber of his character. That was when you invited me to study under you personally. Oh, exactly. I was surprised to see someone so young risk their life so selflessly like that. I wanted to know you better, to learn how such a thing was possible, and the very Tales motif of the mentor wanting to learn something by virtue of taking on the mentee. I'll be honest, Captain. 3 straight days of floor scrubbing was pure murder. Major Victoria said they had to be clean enough to eat from, and then she actually made me do it. Huh. She's not one you want to upset. Although even that experience taught me something. Cleaning a floor taught you something? Wait, was that? Monsters! Possibly the same ones that sank the ship. We'll take care of them. Here they come.
Focus, this will be tight.
Not the starfish. Anything but that, please. I have a family. Yeah, I was thinking we can talk about this while I'm dealing with these nonsense starfish. Again, think about it. It's so nice to see it manifested in the party because, like, we went through that whole sequence of Malik living in his memories and not sharing them with anyone else because it was a context that it didn't make sense to share with anyone else in the party. And now to have that same structural representation of a flashback, but in a format that is shared between 2 characters in the party, namely Asbel and Malik. It's a nice way of adding more context to those past relationships, according to the relationships that are directly informed by them. And again, a nice way to give us windows into different kind of side stories that add depth to the way in which characters know each other, even if it's not something that is the kind of past content that would warrant inclusion in the experiences that the whole party has together. They sank a whole ship! They're super starfish! Maybe Cyandini is out of balance with the rest of the world or something. Who knows? We can wave our hands and come up with an explanation. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kurt has me suspicious we might be a little underleveled too, so hopefully we'll get some more tools of the trade to fix that. It does seem like a lot of the tutorials we're getting now, like this one, are designed to help us further improve through means beyond leveling up. You can increase a weapon CC through dualizing, but it will take a number of steps to make it happen. Increases to the max CC of a weapon are related to the quality's tempering boost percentage. This rate can be found in the quality section of the user's guide. Alright, so improving qualities also improves CC is how I'm reading that, which is still pretty intuitive. I thought I was a goner for sure. I did. Thanks mightily, sirs. Bad news is, the battle knocked everything akimbo down in the hold. You need some help cleaning it up? Shiver me timbers, lad, you sure? It's no problem at all. Oh no, I smell a warehouse quest. So what was it you learned from the floor scrubbing? Cleaning is more fun than you'd think. Oh, come on. It's true. I mean, sure, it was painful at first, but after a while I realized part of me really enjoys it. Maybe it's a way of making up for how messy I was as a kid. Turning something difficult into something fun. That's just like him. Another way we might think about it as we go on here and think about like the plurality of friendships and also the order according to which they're formed by these characters is we might think of that friendship pact and Asbel's act of befriending Richard as kind of a prototype for the later, more robust relationships he would form in his life, in which case maybe part of it is not so much the depth of the relationship, but rather the fact that it was, I think we're led to understand, really one of the first acts of Asbel proactively making friends with someone else, as he does with Sophie, who kind of didn't share any of his context and he just decided we're going to be friends. And so since in that reading, it's kind of the foundational model for friendship according to which he built upon and developed further friendships in his life, the idea of that one being threatened might be a unique threat to his whole like foundation of what it is to develop relationships with other people of the kind that he has developed with Malik. Perhaps it's what makes him so strong. Ah, hell, I may as well pitch in. Sunken cargo! Alright, we got the cargo. Oh, and we didn't even have to do a warehouse quest. I had a sinking feeling for a moment. Pun intended. Yeah, I like that point too, Grail. Like, we talk about the friendship being short. It's kind of cut short because of the actions that Asbel takes that causes the calamity that they never really recover from. So that might also be part of what makes it hard for Asbel and so attached to it. The idea that it could have had a different, more flourishing path had he acted differently and more maturely as a kid. Expert scrubber. He somehow managed to find floor scrubbing fun. Eventually, he came to be known as an expert. And has a new art attached to it. You saved Sable Izole from danger, didn't you? Nice job! Alright, so you had also said, yeah, there was a save point in town with a skip grill. Yeah, I think the save point is over here if memory serves. This year's onion crop is one of the best we've ever had. Here, you seem interested. Why don't you take a few? Thank you so much. Outside the in joke. I'm in. Or I'm out? Let's find out.
Sable Izole, isn't that...
It's a city devoted to the research of Kriya's art. Sharia, what's wrong?
When we visited Sable Izole, people were trying to keep the Rockagong from being killed.
Is that right?
Oh, that's so funny, Grail. I didn't even catch that wording. There's a save point at the skid in this town. That's so fucking funny. That says a lot about how they coordinate where you find skits, though, doesn't it? If they're coextensive, what's the difference, right?
Interesting. Then I assume that must have been when you were all swallowed by the Rockagong.
Stop it! Please don't ever bring that up again.
Excuse me, did I say something wrong?
We talked a lot about butts.
What are you not telling me?
Would you say that Sharia was the butt of that joke? Ah! We made it 2 hours, 45 minutes before the first dad joke. That's pretty good for us. Shows a lot of restraint. Any requests we can fulfill here? Yeah, sunken cargo, alright. Oh, disaster! An old Ray's ship has sunk. Luckily, the crew escaped, but the cargo was lost. Someone, please get the sunken cargo back! I have good news for you, we already did that. That's it! That's the missing cargo. Thank you for returning it to us. Oh, I learned all kinds of stuff. Love that. Oh, we are also looking for a trade permit. It takes forever to go around Verona. I'd like to trade at West Lant Port instead, but I'd need a trade permit from either Lant or Verona. It seems like one it might be worthwhile to do at some point. I never would have guessed, Grail. Good looking out. I just wanted to see quickly before we go if there was any more cool dualizing stuff we could do, since they've been bigging up all of the quality stuff to us over the last little bit. Can we take advantage of any of that? These are still untempered, but we can get some gems at least. Refill and refresh, I think that's a good combo for a gem if memory serves. And vitality with blessing. Recovery arts effect. Vitality and defense, that seems like a good one. Rusty dual blade. I like that. This one's noble. Olden. Restores HP when near death. Seems good. Let's do that. Ooh, a new quality! And it has 7 letters? Oh, my tutorial dad taught me that that's really good. And it has a minimum CC boosting effect, which we know is really good. No, I would agree with that, Grail. I think in the broader universe of Tales equipment development systems, this is also very fun to me. So we might both have Stockholm Syndrome, but I don't think that's the case. And it is nice, as we were talking about, the fact that they let you get so familiar with the system and play around with it, and you can learn different things to take advantage of in the system by talking with NPCs and stuff, before they then later give you further tutorials like we've been seeing in this stream on ways to get even more out of it. Because it really does, like, at least for my kind of playstyle, it makes me feel a lot of license to just explore the system and not feel like I have to be a master at it right away, which then gives me more bandwidth to feel like it's a feasible task to learn it and get the most out of it later in the game. Whereas some of the systems that we saw in Zestiria and Vesperia, where it just seemed like too big an ask to me in the first place to even get off the ground with them, sadly. Chocolate pudding. Not as good as a chocolate fountain, but it's something. Alright, I think that's enough for now. And we still are good with items, right? Yeah, we spent a couple of life bottles. That's right, because we had that boss fight against Richard. So good to restock a little, but I think that's adequate. Yeah, and the idea that there are special things you can dualize, shocker in a Tales game, I know, right? But even the idea of, you know, what we learned in Zavhert, that you can dualize things to create new plushies for the bedridden girl, stuff like that is really fun. And of course, then you can look up guides if you want to be a completionist about it, but I think it also gives you a lot of just dimensions for discovery as you mess around with different combinations on your own over the course of the game. Pardon me, Asbel, but I just remembered I have some unfinished business to attend to. I'll meet up with you later. Yeah, not a good indicator for that guide, Crow. Maybe they just have it slotted in somewhere later. Okay, sure. Take your time. I'll be back soon. Oh, crud. We didn't agree on a place to meet. I'd better catch up before he gets away. So you've learned nothing of use? We did all we could, but there's simply no precedent. Nothing else has even come close to this case. The most likely explanation is that it's somehow connected to Eleth, but it's damned peculiar is all. I mean, who ever heard of light shooting out of someone's hands? Ah, he's trying to learn more about this mysterious glow that he and Asbel and Sharia have. I'm aware of the peculiarities of this condition. Yes, well, thank you for trying. You may go now. Thank you, sir. Something I can do for you, Asbel? There you are. Were you just meeting with someone? It's none of your concern. Okay. Come on, let's get going. It's so easy to tell when he's hiding something. Aw, damn, I must have missed him. Yeah, it might also be Grail, like, since the guide seems to be mindful to when things are time-boxed. I get the sense that maybe the stars are not time-boxed. Although I feel like a few of those which you've directed us to, you said we can lose track of later, so who knows? I'm glad we found it, at least. They do seem, for the most part, pretty easy to run into. I forgot to give him the report. Now what am I supposed to do? Excuse me. Aren't you the gal I saw talking to Hubert earlier? What's it to you? I'm Hubert's brother. I can give him that report if you like. Oh, really? Ah, thanks, pal. That'd be swell. Yeah, that's okay. We started following it pretty tightly after the childhood arc, so we can always go back to them. Just make sure you hand it to him directly. Don't go peeking inside, for the love of clams! I might have to start using the expression for the love of clams in the remainder of this playthrough. So Hubert's got a secret, eh? I suppose I could just... Nah, I better not. Hey, Pink Moon Neko, welcome, my friend. So happy to have you back, too. Yes, you never need to feel any pressure to join into the conversation, but you know it's always a joy to me whenever you show up. You add such a nice color to the chat and just the texture of the live book club, my friend. Hope you've been well. Request item, a report given on an investigation commissioned by Hubert a while back. Ah, the Keeper of Secrets. Hubert, what are you hiding? As he grew older, he began to keep more secrets than he did before, guarding himself. Asbel doesn't know how anything works. He grew up as the kid of the Lord in his little town. Why wouldn't they just give it to me? Alright, so if we go back to the inn for requests, I assume we can drop that off? Oh, no. Interesting. So I wonder if we can deliver the request item later at an inn, or if the point was just to get the item and the title that goes with it. Yeah, two things can also be true, I would venture. They both probably should have known better. Oh, that's hilarious. Your grandmother sounds like a lot of fun, Grail. That's true. Yes, we were talking about the importance of keeping in mind characters' ages earlier in the stream, Pink Moon Neko, so it's a good point that he is just 17. So probably has at least one excuse for not knowing any better. This heat is driving me crazy! I wish I had a bucket of ice water I could stick my head in. No, I take it that you wouldn't ever want that grail. You know, honestly, if we weren't minutes away from our wrap-up time, I would, just for the hell of it, I would go mess around in there. But that seems like it's setting us up for a demoralizing fall at the end of the stream. So I think better to just go for it and see if we can get a couple more skits before we call it.
Stay sharp.
Well, maybe we can start the stream on Monday by taking on the Rockagong for the fun.
It will take more than that to stand in our way.
So many peaches in this desert. Is that a thing? Do peaches grow in deserts? It doesn't sound right. Oh shoot, you're right. How did that happen? Thank you for calling that out, Grail.
Better, but you've still got a ways to go.
Dragon!
You see, Hubert? He's talking
Boar!
to you.
That was directed at the both of you.
Boys, you both have lots to learn.
Hey, Pascal, how does that device work? The one Poisson gave you.
It's got some kind of mechanical bird that pops out and flies back to Poisson.
Did you see this thing, Captain? It's really something. Ah, I guess you're still worried about that letter, huh?
Yes. What if the president refuses to accept the chancellor's word?
The captain is all worried. Stop. Seems to be aging rapidly. Stop. And send. Bye-bye.
Wow, look at it soar through the sky.
You guys should be nicer to the captain. Just because he's worrying all the time doesn't mean he's getting old.
Well, one thing is for certain. I'm not too old to take you young whelps over my knee.
My man. Malik is the best. Now we have a healer. Not my preferred healer, but a healer.
Stay sharp, even against jumps. Not bad, don't you think?
He's everyone's dad. He is dad goals. Since I model all of the roles to which I aspire in my life off of video game characters, as any educated gentleman does, he is the paragon of dadness. Well, I didn't have much of a choice about it after you pointed out we didn't have a healer in the party. I like her when she doesn't die. This is our Carta friend, right? Well, we might as well try this out once, and then that can be a fun note on which to wrap up the stream, and then we'll dig in on Monday. No, but we can give her more distance from which to appreciate and respect her when she's outside the party. That's all. Outside the active battle party, I mean. Oh, looks like you've got some magic Carta cards. You mean these? Yup. Check out the back. See how each card has a famous quote from the hero on the front? Well, in this game, one person reads the first half of the quote, then the rest of us tries to identify which card it's from. Ooh, that sounds fun. That's how you play Magic Carta. Sounds awesome. Okay, I'll read the first half. Most of them were pretty iconic, but now I understand why some of them were not so iconic. Wait, I almost forgot a very important rule. When you read the quote, you have to try and sound like the hero who said it. Oh no. But I don't know who any of these people are. It's okay, Asbel, I do. Ah, don't worry. A smart kid like you will figure it out in no time. Huh, he can handle it. Come on, Captain, help me out here. What about you, Pascal? Is that okay? Heck yeah, I was famous for my impersonations back home. It's Magic Carta time. Ready, set, Carta. I'm the one picking them, you know.
You will always be my young master.
That's Sheltier, isn't it?
I will follow you, no matter what.
I would never been able to do this had I not played this so deep into Tales of Praxis.
Ollie, she liked you.
Oh, break my heart all over again, buddy.
A ladle in my right hand and a frying pan in my left.
Arise! Wake the dead!
You thought you could win?
It's Frida, right?
Too bad.
My girl. I'm just awesome. It's almost like the CPU didn't spend the better part of the last year living inside of these universes. You got me! Now take this! That was a very nice note on which to wrap up. I'm happy with that. Oh, and he acquired the Dark Enforcer title. Speaking of title overlap, I love that. What's the description? I fully believe it does, but it was nice to start with a win before it got so hard pottery. Is this Dark Enforcer? No, that's Expert Scrubber. Where is it hiding from me? Pilferator? Oh, it's all the way down at the bottom. Dark Enforcer. Oh, brilliant blade of coldest steel, rend the darkness and crush my enemies to nothing. Oh, it was Tales of Vesperia all the way down. Oh, is it a costume title? Is that why it has the little different icon? Oh, it's not a custom title. Oh, I see. It customizes with level. Oh yeah, costume. Fun! Very cool. I'm excited to see that costume. That'll be a good one. Lovely. Hey, Hoshi. Nice to see you, friend. Yeah, you're just coming in at the end of the stream, but hope to see you back the next time we do it, which will be on Monday. All right, my dear friendos. Well, finally we have enough cards to play Magic Carta, which is perhaps the most authentically Tales of Praxis way to wrap things up on a Friday stream, celebrating a very special lens into the intertextuality between these wonderful works of art. We got another decent chunk of story done. I don't know whether it's just that there's something in the cadence of the game or something in the water in terms of our energy and appetite for digging in, but we are making some heartfelt and satisfying progress. We don't know what the heck poor Richard is up to, but we did reach that climactic moment, as Grail pointed out, where he was seemingly lost to whatever other presence has now fully manifested within him. And we are at the very Abyss and Vesperia moment in the story, where now, in a world where all of these countries had mostly modeled their existence just relative to international relations, now we're asking the world to basically transform its own conception of relationships to instead band together against something that has nothing to do with nationality, in much the same way as we've seen Sophie is struggling with the way in which her offered roles are constraining and really essentially damaging her, and we are perhaps being invited to think through other more holistic and empowering ways to assign characters roles and titles and everything in between as well. A pleasure. Yes, Hoshi, just for your benefit, since you did come in late, yeah, we're wrapping up, but we do this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, usually going for about 3 hours. Check out withaterriblefate.com if you're interested in learning more. We're all about the literary study of video games, and I've been doing this combination stream and article series for the better part of a year, just studying and celebrating the language of the Tales games in terms of the themes that they're concerned with, the messages they teach us players. So if you love the Tales games, you're home, my friend. Welcome to it, and I hope to see you back here on Monday. For the other dear, more familiar friends on the stream, the old familiars in the real-life JRPG party, Grail, Pottery, Pink Moon Neko. So wonderful to see you all, my friends. It was great to have a nice quorum here on this fine Friday night. I'm so enjoying working through this game with all of you. We've seen a lot of the ins and outs in terms of how it integrates with the other games, yet says something and is challenging us to think about things that do feel distinctly Grace's. So we're at that point in the story where I think we'll gradually be experiencing revelations that also give us a good context to think about what we're doing with these characters and what they're deciding to do, that doesn't put their past aside, but puts them in different standing in relation to one another and what it is that they want to achieve next. All of those considerations that are part and parcel of how these games unfold their stories. So that's what we've got. It's been a great Friday evening. So nice to see so many people showing up. We do treat these streams as live book clubs, as I'm fond of saying, and we discover in the conversation so many new layers and considerations in these games, many of which I'd never thought about before, connections I'd never seen. But as in a JRPG party where diversity affords so many different kinds of insights and possibilities in the world and the progress that the party makes, so too is it the case in the Twitch party and in the chat. So truly, I thank you all for that. I hope you have a great weekend and that you think well and you game well. You check out withaterriblefate.com if you want any more content to sate your appetite for the literary study of video games. And we'll be right back here with more Tales of Graces F at 7 p.m. Eastern on Monday. Don't miss it. If you're a new viewer, would love to welcome you into the community. We are always looking for, I was going to say fresh meat, but people with different perspectives to shed their own light and experiences with gaming on the series. And Doug, I forgot to shout you out, buddy, but it was so nice to see you back here too. I'm glad that we're getting more insight into your theories as you're continuing to actively read the game along with us. Cheers, my dear friends. We'll have lots more updates on a full range of new literary analytic content about video games coming in the next few weeks as well. Should look forward to at least a few different fun pieces of multimedia stuff before the end of the year wraps. Maybe an article, certainly podcast. We're recording something over the weekend, so stay tuned. Have a grand weekend, and I'll see you sooner than you know it. Cheers, my friends. We'll see you next time.